Chapter 759. Putting her finger into the jar filled with osmanthus honey, butterfly monster Luo Dance put her finger into her mouth, sucking it carefully with a satisfied expression. She felt that the osmanthus honey's taste was a little special, and it gave her a warm feeling. It reminded her of the smile of the uncle and aunt in the bun shop. Maybe this was the taste of happiness? She suddenly felt a little reluctant to finish the jar of osmanthus honey in one go. But Butterfly Monster still tasted 4 fingers in succession, and then warned herself that she would taste the last one. So, when she tasted the 8th finger, she reluctantly closed the lid of the jar, and began to lick the remaining sweetness from her finger, letting out a long breath of satisfaction. Luo Dance calmed down, and then remembered Su Zijuan. She remembered that she accompanied Sister Zijuan here to repair the seal of the underground ley line, and then Sister Zijuan gave her something to eat, and then she seemed to fall asleep. Luo Dance looked back at the big cocoon she had just climbed out of, blinking her eyes. She remembered that when she evolved for the first time, she also formed a similar big cocoon. But according to her knowledge, she should only form a cocoon once in her life. Not only that, the monster power in her body seemed to be much stronger. Butterfly Monster, who didn't understand what had happened to her, quickly thought of Su Zijuan, and planned to go back and ask her about the situation. But when she stood up, she found that her body was cold. It turned out that she was naked. This was nothing, after all, monster race was born to exist in nature with their own bodies. But she had been in human society for some time, and learned some etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame of the human world. She knew that it was inappropriate to appear in front of people like this, especially in front of the opposite sex. Luo Dance subconsciously recalled that when she completed the first evolution in her life, when she broke the new big cocoon and opened her eyes for the first time, she saw Boss Luochio, and her heart slightly jumped. She couldn't go out casually like this. Luo Dance covered her face at once. She felt that it was a little hot. However, this subconscious action caused the jar of honey in his hand to fall to the ground. This scared Luo Dance, and she hurriedly stretched out her hands to catch it. She finally caught it, even though she was kneeling on the ground with her buttocks sticking up in a very indescribable posture. But at least she caught the jar at the moment when it was about to touch the ground. Otherwise, it would be too sinful to let the sweet osmanthus honey spill all over the ground. In this case, Luo Dance felt that even her late mother would not forgive her. Good. She finally breathed a sigh of relief, and patted her chest slightly. Luo Dance found that she seemed to be a little bit wrong. She looked down at her body and blinked. Then, her hands subconsciously moved toward her chest. A heavy feeling spread in her palms. Luo Dance subconsciously held it a few more times, looking at the ripples on the body part in front of her chest like water. How did it become so big? Now it was even more difficult to leave this place. Luo Dance felt that she had encountered a great problem, and couldn't help but frown. At this time, the gift box that originally contained the osmanthus honey suddenly scattered, and then quietly turned into a cloud of light mist. In the absence of wind, it slowly attached to the body of the little butterfly monster, gradually taking shape, and finally turned into a pink dress. And the colorful ribbon that originally wrapped the box gradually became bigger, and finally wrapped around Luo Dance's waist, turning into a belt, tightening the slightly loose dress. Luo Dance's mouth slightly opened. She didn't think that the box had such a function. She immediately lifted the dress and then spun it briskly. The lotus leaf-like dress scattered in the rotation, and then her snow-white calves were quietly exposed. Sister Zijuan is so thoughtful. Luo Dance smiled lightly. In this way, she could safely go back to the hospital without being afraid of being seen by human beings. The little butterfly monster naturally remembered the way out of the cave. When she just came out of the water, she saw that the sky was dark. It turned out that it was already night. She was anxious to go back to the hospital, so she directly opened her butterfly wings. 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3 pairs. What surprised Luo Dance was that her butterfly wings had completely changed their appearance. They were as thin as cicadas' wings, and at the same time emitted a golden and silver glimmer. She just opened these 3 pairs of wings, and then her body was out of control and instantly flew to the sky. This speed was far beyond the past. In the blink of an eye, she rose to an incredible height, above the clouds. The temperature here was much higher than that of the underground. Luo Dance felt a trace of coldness, but her body now steadily stopped above the clouds. Above them, a crescent moon hung high in the sky, emitting a bright white light. She was above the clouds, gazing at the stars in the night sky, like a fairy who had left behind the world. She didn't know why she came to this troubled world. However, a huge black shadow suddenly rushed from the distance, and a loud noise made the little butterfly monster wake up instantly. In front of her was the great masterpiece of the human world, an airliner. The huge plane, at this time on a fixed route, didn't seem to find the existence of such a pure elf in the night sky, and very ruthlessly crashed into her. Luo Dance was shocked, and suddenly let her body sink. The plane flew over her head very quickly, and the loud noise made her ears a little painful. At the same time, the airflow from the plane blew her far away. She was still not very familiar with the new wings. Luo Dance was scared and her face turned pale. She felt that the late Grandpa Tree Monster was right. There were too many dangers in the human world. She took a deep breath, held the honey jar with both hands, and broke through the clouds again, falling down to the city below. Once again, she entered the mortal world. Just now, was there a light shadow passing by? In the business class of the plane, a man who looked like a businessman asked his companion beside him. None of his companions saw it. Maybe they were dazzled. At this time, the stewardess of the plane opened the curtain, walked into the business class, and warmly greeted every passenger. "Hello, sir, now the indoor temperature is 23 degrees, and the flight time is 2 hours and 35 minutes. Give me some water." In the last row of the business class, in the seat near the window, Wang Yuechuan looked at the gradually smaller city outside the window, and said directly without looking back, which was a kind of response. After the stewardess brought the water, he straightened the collar of his coat, and at the same time wrapped his clothes, lowered his head, and closed his eyes. The road ahead was unknown. This Christmas snow didn't last long. The falling snow quickly turned into droplets of water in the city. Not long after, it disappeared without a trace. It was like a dream. People would never forget that there had been such a white Christmas Eve in the south. Before midnight, Li Zi parted with Ren Xiling in front of the square. She trotted ahead, and then at the end of the road, she turned around, raised her arm and waved, and finally disappeared at the corner. At this time, Ren Xiling looked at Luoqiu and said. She didn't know why. Every time she saw Li Zi disappear at the corner of the road, she felt a kind of heartache, as if she would never be seen again after this time. She said that Li Zi was really lonely. She came to this city alone without any relative. Maybe there is already one, Luoqiu said casually. No matter it was the one in his hand, Yu Yi, or Ren Xiling's necklace. The crystals inlaid in them were actually tears. Ice's tears. It was not easy for the indifferent ice to shed tears, but once it was shed, it would be heartache. Ren Xiling lowered her head and played with the necklace on her neck. She liked this necklace, so after Li Zi gave it to her, she immediately put it on. Yes. She smiled. At this time, only she, Luoqiu, and Yu Yi were left. Auntie Ren took a deep breath at this time, quietly pulled Luoqiu to a corner, and then looked around mysteriously. Finally, she quickly stuffed a hard card in Boss Luo's hand, and hurriedly turned around and left, saying that she could go back alone, and it didn't matter if Luoqiu didn't come back tonight. Her speed was so fast that Luoqiu had no room to speak. Luoqiu looked at the hard card in his hand, and turned it over to look. The name of a hotel was written on it, and this hotel was obviously one of the most expensive in the city. So this hard card was actually the hotel room key. She is really generous. Luoqiu smiled slightly. He closed his eyes, and could imagine Renzeiling's painful look when she paid for the room. Luocchio naturally couldn't really go to the hotel suite, but if he didn't check in, Renzeiling would inevitably nag him. So he just went through a simple check-in procedure. After entering the room, he directly returned to the club from the hotel suite. He came to the room on the third floor of the club alone. The third gold and silver card that he got in Yen Wuiue's world was now suspended above his palm. It was not the first time that Luocchio saw another form of the altar. Before this, he had successfully embedded 2 gold and silver cards in the second form of the hidden altar. Without any hesitation, Luocchio let the gold and silver card fly into the pillar that extended from the altar. The third gold and silver card suddenly shone, and then directly sank into a groove on the pillar. When the gold and silver card was embedded for the first time, the second form of the altar projected a gray-white earth in front of Luocchio. Later, the former boss asked Erex to send the second gold and silver card. After Luocchio embedded it, there were no new changes here, but Luocchio directly skipped a stage of accumulation and opened the critical door. As a club boss, his ability directly improved to an incredible level. From the second gold and silver card sinking into the ground, to the spiritual ascension on the island during the Golden Week, Luocchio completely completed a kind of transformation that even he himself couldn't explain. At this time, when the third gold and silver card was embedded, Luocchio felt completely different. The altar in front of him seemed to come alive in an instant. In the past, the communication between him and the altar had always been on a spiritual level. The feeling that the altar gave him was that it was lifeless, as if it had been designed beforehand. In order to make himself feel relaxed, Luocchio had tried his best to imagine the voice of the altar, but after all, it was only his own imagination. The altar still had no emotional fluctuation, as if it was a dead object. But at this moment, this feeling of coming alive made Luocchio feel very strange. He was about to carefully distinguish it, but this feeling suddenly faded away. It was as if a person who had fallen asleep had suddenly opened his eyes. However, he had only opened his eyes a little before falling asleep once again. He had fallen into a deep sleep, as if he had fallen into a deep sleep. But it was alive. This time, it just wants me to confirm that the altar is alive, Luocchio muttered to himself. Although this discovery was very important, it was still far from being a pleasant surprise. Luocchio shook his head. When he was about to restore the altar to its first form, a huge hourglass gradually emerged in front of Luocchio. This hourglass was also the reflection of the altar's second form. It appeared in front of the gray-white earth, and the two were almost opposite each other. Luocchio frowned. This newly projected hourglass was very similar to the hourglass that calculated his lifespan when he first became the club owner. At that time, that hourglass calculated his remaining lifespan, but it was only 30 days. Today, this hourglass still existed. However, it would take a very long time before a small grain of sand would fall from his hourglass, as if it was unwilling to do so. The appearance of the hourglass naturally means to calculate time. Luocchio pondered for a moment and said to himself, "If I continue to collect these gold and silver cards, will the sand in the hourglass start to flow one day? Then, when the sand in this hourglass ran out, what would appear? It's time to see the outside world," Luocchio muttered to himself, and the altar's second form began to disappear gradually. After opening the anti-theft door, Sub-editor Ren still looked like a defeated dog. But Luocchio naturally wouldn't wait for her in the living room. Renzeiling's hands hung down like a zombie, and her feet hooked behind her to close the door. Then she dragged her hollowed-out body back to the room. She didn't take off her clothes, but directly lay on her stomach on the bed. But she felt as if something was pushing against her abdomen, something hard. Renzeiling frowned, turning over her body reluctantly, and reaching into the quilt to take out a rectangular box. There was a sticky note on it which read, "Merry Christmas." This was Luocchio's handwriting. Renzeiling was stunned and muttered, "Forget it, brat, Don't forget me after you have a wife. Wait, the shape of this box. Is there anything strange in it? Renziling suddenly shuddered, and quickly opened it violently. She opened a thick, long and round thing. It was just a thermos bottle for drinking water, but it was convenient to put in the storage compartment of the car. Renziling looked at this thermos bottle, and suddenly burst into laughter. Then she fell asleep with this cheap thing in her arms. It seemed that the festive decorations in the club's lobby were wasted. The boss and Miss Servant Girl weren't there for the whole night. Luocio walked all the way up from the third floor of the basement. When he appeared at the entrance of the lobby, Miss Servant Girl, who was sitting on the chair, opened her eyes and was about to get up. But Luocio waved his hand at this time, indicating that Yu Yi didn't need to stand up. Miss Servant Girl showed a puzzled look. Luocio didn't explain, but just looked at the decorations around the lobby. It feels a bit wasteful. Yu Yi said softly, considering the time zone, Christmas Eve hasn't passed yet. That's right. Luocio smiled and suddenly snapped his fingers. The gramophone quietly placed in the corner of the lobby was automatically turned on at this time. A vinyl disc flew into the gramophone, and then slowly rotated under the stylus, like a black whirlpool. The music that seemed to come from a distant time and space began to sound. It was the tune of a fantasy movie about a ring many years ago, May It Be. May the stars twinkle in the night sky, endless starlight guides your journey forward, may the curtain of darkness fall, evil things stay away from your holy heart, shouldn't it play Amazing Grace? Yu Yi blinked and asked curiously. Luocio walked towards her. He came to Yu Yi, gently holding her hand. You are my grace. Luocio kissed Yu Yi's hand gently, and then whispered, Mai. Chapter 760. Hiruxin Suzuki had just passed his 22nd birthday and had successfully graduated from a well-known university abroad. In the Suzuki family, which was full of violent elements, Hiruxin Suzuki, who was bookish, seemed so out of place. However, Hiruxin Suzuki was not treated badly in the Suzuki family. Instead, he was more and more valued by his father, Yuichi Suzuki. The world was different. The old Yuichi Suzuki knew that the foundation he had grasped could no longer be protected by his fists alone. He understood that the future of the Suzuki family needed a talent with real knowledge and a long-term vision. As the CEO of the company, Hiruxin Suzuki began to increase the profits of the Suzuki family's businesses in just a few months. Such an outstanding son of the Suzuki family was really hard to find fault with. Therefore, there were even rumors outside that Yuichi Suzuki even had the intention of letting Hiruxin Suzuki take over Suzuki Kai. Suzuki Kai was the foundation of the Suzuki Consortium. In some industries, the giant Suzuki Consortium was actually just a source of income to support the larger Suzuki Kai. There was no special country that could breed a special, dynamic, social organization like Suzuki Kai. Some people believed that if Hiruxin Suzuki could take the helm, Suzuki Kai would definitely go further. After all, the achievements of Chuanshin were obvious to all. But naturally, some people were sad. For example, Hiruxin Suzuki's brother, Natsuya Suzuki's AIDS. If there were no accidents, the eldest son, Natsuya Suzuki, would inherit Suzuki Kai. Speaking of Natsuya Suzuki, he was the pride of Suzuki Kai. Some people even called him the strongest man in Suzuki Kai. He was a person who made the whole Kanto region tremble in fear. He had always been known for his ruthlessness. It's just that God's fairness lies in the fact that it gave Suzuki a strong body and ruthless overlord aptitude, but it didn't quietly enhance his wisdom. Therefore, the strongest man in Suzuki Kai also had another nickname: the Idiot of Suzuki Kai. Why? The following were Natsuya Suzuki's achievements. In a deal that was almost agreed upon, Natsuya Suzuki, as the person in charge, was late for the meeting and failed because he overslept. In an important meeting about an alliance with a friendly force, he entered the wrong door and barged into the negotiation venue. He even mistook someone else for someone else. In the end, he inexplicably fought with a third party. Not only did the alliance fail, but he also made a new enemy for Suzuki Kai. He mistook an official's wife for a prostitute in a brothel and seduced her. Later, the official's wife said that she wanted to elope for love. He sold a batch of important goods at a low price. He bought a large amount of meat and planned to stockpile it, but found that it was expired products. He chopped the wrong senator's son. He could not graduate from high school for 10 years. Haruxan Suzuki had just returned from the company. As soon as he returned to Suzuki's house, several servants in the house hurriedly came out to greet him. Haruxan Suzuki had a handsome appearance. This was mostly because he inherited the genes of his mother, who was once a very famous movie star. "Young Master Chuanshin, do you want to take a bath or eat first? Where's father?" Haruxan Suzuki smiled slightly. He was also gentle towards the servant. "Master and young Master Xiao went to a banquet, so they won't be back for dinner tonight," the servant replied very respectfully. "Oh, is that so? Whose banquet is it?" Chuanshin casually nodded and asked in a seemingly casual manner. "It seems to be Mr. Sato's family banquet." The Mr. Sato mentioned by the servant was a highly respected old man in the Kanto region. He had a great influence on many things. Haruxan Suzuki suddenly said, "I want to take a bath first. When I'm hungry, I'll ask you to prepare the food." "Okay." The servant watched Haruxan Suzuki go up the stairs and muttered in a low voice, "Ah, young Master Chuanshin is so outstanding. It would be great if Master brought him over. There's no other way. After all, young Master Xiao is the orthodox one, and young Master Chuanshin is..." After returning to the room, Haruxan Suzuki didn't really take a bath. Instead, he sat on the chair in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and sat down tiredly. He seemed a little irritated as he loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of water. He drank it all in one gulp, and the heavy feeling in his chest subsided a little. With Sato's status, if we can get his support, it will be much easier for eldest brother to inherit the Suzuki Kai. I heard that Sato's woman is very beautiful. If we can get married, we can take advantage of Sato's power and connections to reach the sky in one step. Haruxan Suzuki sneered and said faintly, "This is a good opportunity. Naturally, we should leave the eldest son. As for me, I'm still working overtime. I don't know anything. Father is really biased." Haruxan Suzuki suddenly waved his hand and pushed the tea table next to him to the ground to release the anger in his heart. But soon, he took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He wouldn't show it. He wouldn't show his resentment and dissatisfaction in front of anyone. At this time, Haruxan Suzuki seemed to hear something. It was a sound that seemed to appear in his ears. But there was no source of this sound in the room. Hiss, 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 it was near and far, like the sound of a horrible thing. Haruxan Suzuki's heart beat violently at this time. He seemed to hear the call of himself from this strange sound. At this moment, Haruxan Suzuki only had one thought: to find the owner of this sound. He opened the door of the room, and slowly walked towards the depths of Suzuki's mansion with a blank expression. On the way, Haruxan Suzuki didn't meet the servants of Suzuki's family. This was because in the depths of the mansion, there were some places where servants were forbidden from entering. The meeting place of the Suzuki Kai, Yuichi Suzuki's study. The place where the Suzuki's family kept their valuables. The treasure room. Haruxan Suzuki was now standing in front of the treasure room of the Suzuki's family. Here, only Yuichi Suzuki had the key to open the door. As for the key, it had always been hidden by Suzuki Yuichi. But at this time, the door of the treasure room was strangely opened. Haruxan Suzuki slowly opened the door of the treasure room and walked in. Who is calling me?" Haruxan Suzuki's eyes gradually became dim, and his voice became weaker and weaker. He found that his thinking suddenly became very slow. In fact, from the moment he heard this strange sound, his thinking began to slow down. Hiss, 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 hiss now. His thinking seemed to have completely stopped. He couldn't think about anything, even if what he saw at this time was something that should have frightened him, a strange and ferocious purple snake. The purple snake was now coiled on the table in the treasure room. Its head was upright, and it was sticking out its black snake tongue at Haruxan Suzuki. Hiss, hiss, hiss. At this moment, the little purple snake suddenly jumped out from the table. At this time, Haruxan Suzuki opened his mouth. The purple snake directly entered Haruxan Suzuki's body from his mouth without any resistance. In an instant, Haruxan Suzuki's face became extremely painful, but strangely, he didn't make any movement. His eyes began to turn white, and the pain made his whole face completely distort at this moment. Finally, Haruxan Suzuki's whole body fell to the ground, and there was no movement. Not long after, Haruxan Suzuki stood up from the ground again. His expression had already returned to normal, but there was a flash of purple light in his eyes, and then it disappeared. Haruxan Suzuki began to move his wrist, and other parts of his body, as if to familiarize himself with this body. So weak. I didn't expect that after not returning to the Lord's world for so long, the human body now has become so weak. Haruko Suzuki muttered to himself. At the same time, another cold voice sounded in the treasure room. Hakata, let's talk about a good body later. Now we have to figure out where this place is. I feel that we are very far away from Kelowna. At this time, Haruxan Suzuki chuckled and said, Brother Lianjun, don't worry. My identity as a vessel seems to be good. Also, didn't you notice that when we just escaped, the surroundings are giving us a terrifying pressure? The Lord's world's rejection of us is much stronger than it was a few hundred years ago. Now that I am hiding in this human body, the pressure has lessened by a lot. You have been hiding in Yen Wuyue's world for so many years, so naturally you are not used to it. But I have always been in the Lord's world, so I have long been used to this kind of pressure. Brother Lianjun, that was also when you had an inheritor and lived in the body of an inheritor, right? Now, I don't think you can deal with it easily. The cold voice suddenly became silent. Haruko Suzuki then said indifferently, Brother Lianjun, since you and I have already formed an alliance, we should not abandon each other. Don't worry, I will not let you down. Later, I will find a body for you to temporarily live in. After saying that, Haruko Suzuki turned and walked out of the Suzuki family's treasure room and laughed softly. The Lord's world is now so weak? It seems that the return of my ancestor Hakata this time is also an opportunity. The two who walked out of the Suzuki family's treasure room were the Hakata serpent and Een Greedy Wolf, who had escaped from Yen Wuyue's world, and had miraculously formed some kind of inseparable contract. Chapter 761. Renziling's face was gloomy when she answered the magazine early in the morning. The staff who were familiar with the deputy editor could feel that the temperature of the whole office seemed to drop by 3 degrees after Renziling came back. This situation made many staff begin to guess what happened to Renziling. Aunt Flo, editor A affirmed. Well, Aunt Flo, editor B felt it was reasonable. Yes, I guess it's also Aunt Flo. Let's be careful. Scheming Boy reminded the staff. Bang! Sitting in front of her desk in her personal office, Renziling had just taken out a pile of documents from the drawer. Then, she slapped it heavily on the table. Lizzie, who was eating a finger biscuit, blinked her eyes. Of course, her sensitive ears could hear the staff's conversation in the hall outside through the exhaust pipe. Is it really Aunt Flo? Renziling stared at Lizzie fiercely. Lizzie had some guesses in her heart, so she said, Sister Ren, did Luochio not go to the hotel last night and go straight home? She knew very well Renziling's persistence to have a grandson. That hotel was originally booked by Renziling with her. No, he didn't come back last night. Renziling was expressionless, but this was a sign before the eruption of a volcano. Lizzie was frightened and said hesitantly, Isn't that good? He didn't come back last night, so he probably succeeded. Congratulations, Sister Ren. Not only did he not come back last night, but he won't come back for a long time. Ren Xiling's voice was more indifferent. Lizzie knew this was the state before Ren Xiling's anger reached the extreme. She swallowed her saliva subconsciously and didn't stuff food into her mouth for the first time. Why? Ren Xiling suddenly sighed, and her pale face suddenly became worried. She shook her head and said, I don't know. This brat woke me up with a phone call in the morning. Then I told him that I had something to do and had to accompany Yu Yi back to her hometown to deal with it. He wouldn't come back in a short time. If he was in a hurry, he would go directly to the school in England from there. Maybe he won't come back until the summer vacation next year. Lizzie counted with her fingers. Wow, it's been a long time. No wonder Sister Ren is angry. That's right. Ren Xiling was so angry at this time that she evolved into an unstoppable ant-level disaster. She scolded Luochio to no end. You say, does this brat still care about me? How can he just leave? He doesn't have any responsibility at all. Lizzie blinked her eyes and suddenly said, But Sister Ren, Luochio is an adult now, right? He should have the ability to make decisions by himself. Ren Xiling was stunned. She moved her lips as if she wanted to refute something. Lizzie bit off a finger of biscuit. You can't protect him for a lifetime. I know. Ren Xiling sighed and said sadly, Since he told me that he was going to study abroad, I knew that he would come back sooner or later. But I didn't expect. What should I do in the future? It was so sudden that she didn't prepare for it. Lizzie was very clear about Ren Xiling's feelings for Luochio. She treated him like a son or a younger brother who hadn't grown up yet. How could Ren Xiling accept this sudden change? Sister Ren, don't worry, I will accompany you. Lizzie showed a bright smile. Ren Xiling suddenly stared at her and said, Can you wash my clothes? Can you cook for me? Can you buy shampoo and shower gel for me? Can you clean my house? Lizzie didn't chew the food in her mouth. She suddenly felt sorry for Luochio for 3 seconds and then laughed loudly. I've decided. Ren Xiling took a deep breath at this time. She slapped the table with both hands and stood up. Lizzie was shocked. I've decided. I want to jump ship. Ren Xiling clenched her fists and her eyes were shining. I want to go abroad too. Yes. I want to be an international reporter. As a reporter, I didn't aim to be a Pulitzer Prize winner. I'm such a failure. Lizzie felt that it was good for Ren Xiling to have such ambition. She asked curiously, Sister Ren, what's your English level? Don't care about these details. Haha, suddenly, the pet hospital was crowded. In the hospital, at this time, among the overcrowded patients, a beautiful figure was shuttling back and forth like a butterfly. Of course, this figure was indeed a very rare butterfly. Dance, my waist is a little painful. Whoa! Master Weasel will give you a squeeze. How do you feel? Do you feel better? Ouch! My leg. I don't know why my leg is cramping. It's so painful. It's so painful. Little butterfly, let me have a look. Ouch! Ah! Uncle Toad, wait, I'll come right away. How are you? Cough! Cough! My chest is so painful. It's so painful. It's so painful. Wait, I'll give you a massage right away. So busy. Long Shiro looked at Luo Dance's busy figure. Didn't this girl know that none of these old fellows who were crying out in pain were actually sick? She couldn't help sighing. So many things happened last night that she forgot to tell Luo Dance that the shop was not open. As usual, Luo Dance woke up early and opened the door of the hospital. No one knew who was waiting for the news that the little butterfly monster nurse, Luo Dance, who had disappeared for a long time, had returned. This news spread like a plague in an instant. Enough. Get out of here. The shop is closed today. Long Shirua snorted in front of the monsters. At this time, the whole place was quiet. The monsters looked at this small figure and blinked their eyes. A chicken monster directly fell down from the chair at this time. Ouch! Dance, my butt hurts. It's so painful. This was embarrassing. Long Shirua didn't announce her identity at this time. Some people knew that she was Chichi Kamaya's disciple and had an unclear relationship with the dragon god. Very few people knew that she was the Shinryu Saintess at this time. Only Mo Xiaofei and Luo Dance knew that she was the real Kelowna Shinryu. But her identity on the surface was naturally not enough to hold back these old thugs of the monster world in front of her. Long Shirua's face was ashen at this time. She held the divine pearl in her hand and began to draw some Shinryu's power. She said coldly, "Get out of here. I don't care if you're sick or not." A huge monster power came. This was the real Shinryu's power, which had a great impact on thousands of monsters. At this moment, the monsters were all sweating and trembling with fear. "You can't do this to me. I've moved bricks for this hospital. Why don't you let me be treated here? I've added tiles for the construction of this hospital. Little girl, even if you're Chichi Kamaya's disciple, so what? Let me tell you, the old tortoise has to call me third cousin when he sees me. Humph! Even if Lord Long is here, he won't dare to drive me away like this. How dare you? All the water in this hospital is sent by me. Get out!" Long Shirua suddenly roared, and the power of the true dragon broke out. Like a hot knife through butter, it destroyed all the monsters, making their blood and chi unstable. Their faces were pale and full of horror, and they left the hospital one after another. Long Shirua directly pulled down the gate of the hospital and kicked it fiercely. It seemed that she was still angry. "Sister, Sister Long," Luo Dance called weakly at this time. Looking at Luo Dance's innocent expression, Long Shirua's heart softened. She sighed and said, "Let's continue to close down. I'm not in a good state now. Now let's talk about it after I have a perfect plan." "Whoa. Okay." Long Shirua looked at Luo Dance again and frowned. She suddenly said, "Girl, can't you change your clothes?" "Why?" Luo Dance asked puzzledly. Long Shirua raised her head and stared at the little butterfly monster's chest. How did she suddenly grow to this extent? This dress was originally made according to Luo Dance's previous size. Now it could be worn, but the position of the chest was a bit too pure and moving, plus this fatal exposure. No wonder those old guys who had half a foot in the coffin seemed to be injected with chicken blood. It was simply against the rules. "Nothing." Long Shirua sighed. "In short, you just need to remember, don't reveal my identity. Remember, don't tell anyone, okay?" Luo Dance hurriedly covered her mouth with her hands and nodded seriously. "I'll go back to the office. You can clean up here." Long Shirua waved her hand at this time. "Go to the supermarket to buy some daily necessities later. It's not convenient for me to go out recently." Luo Dance picked up the broom happily. Long Shirua shook her head. After glancing at Luo Dance, she returned to her office. This little girl suddenly came back last night. At that time, seeing Luo Dance suddenly appearing in front of her, Long Shirua was really startled. Not only because some changes had happened to Luo Dance's body, but also some strange changes had happened inside her. Long Shirua didn't know what Suzy Juan did to Luo Dance before leaving. She just felt that Luo Dance's demon power had improved several levels. However, with her insight, she could see that this kind of improvement was not due to excessive enthusiasm. But this silly girl didn't know that she had changed at this time. She didn't even know that she had slept for several months. Long Shirua spent most of the night to let this silly girl know what had happened during this time. Long Shirua's body became small, like a human child. She was so sleepy that she fell asleep. She forgot to say that she didn't need to open the shop, so this thing happened early in the morning. She just returned to the door of the office and saw Zixing waiting there. Long Saintess. This young master of the greedy wolf tribe was as polite as ever. At this time, she first greeted her and then talked about business. "Are you leaving now?" Long Shirua asked in surprise. "Your injury?" Zixing nodded and said, Zixing originally took my tribe to Mount Tai, but there were many things on the way, so the time was delayed. Now the gathering of Mount Tai is imminent, and Zixing also needs to go to prepare. I really can't stay here. I hope Long Saintus can forgive me. The place where the greedy wolf tribe lived was on the plateau. Although it was an unworldly place, after all, it was far away from the central plains. There were many shortages in materials, so it was inevitable that materials from the central plains would be transported. It seemed that the greedy wolf tribe planned to win with other demon lineage families in this gathering of Mount Tai. It's nothing. Long Shirua nodded and said, I will give you some medicine later. Take it on time on the way. It will be good for you. With the medicine made by Long Saintus, we will be able to recover quickly. Zixing said happily, then, I will trouble Long Saintus. It's a piece of cake. A smile appeared on Long Shirua's face. Zixing was quite decisive. After explaining the purpose of her visit, she immediately left. Long Shirua felt that this generation's young mistress of Purple Star was quite rare. She did not have the arrogance of the previous generations at all. Perhaps this generation's young mistress of Purple Star could bring the greedy wolf tribe out of their predicament. After all, according to the agreement she made with the founding father of this country, the monster race needed to send some powerful monsters to serve in a special institution of the country every once in a while. However, the greedy wolf tribe had always refused to do so. There were already many contradictions between the two. I hope this generation's Zixing can ease the tension between the two, she shook her head. Just as she sat down, a phone call came to her. It was a call from Chichi Kamaya. Chichi Kamaya? Why, aren't you already in Mount Tai? Long Shirua picked up the phone with some surprise. Listening to the slightly anxious voice on the other side of Chichi Kamaya, her brows gradually furrowed. She held a small note in her hand, on which were written all the things she needed to buy. Luo Dance carried 2 big bags with both hands, but she didn't seem to struggle. Well, it seems that I've bought everything. With a smile on her face, she thought about what to do next, but she didn't notice that there were constantly male gazes around her. Luo Dance quickly walked into a bakery, bought some milk and bread, and hurried in the direction of the old town. She often ran back to the old town. There were many stray cats and dogs there. Luo Dance thought that she had slept for a few months. She didn't know if they were hungry during her absence. But when the little butterfly monster came to the open space in the old town, she saw that someone had already arrived before her. At this time, the person was scattering cat and dog food on the ground. Ah! Luo Dance let out a low cry. Hearing this voice, the person who was feeding these stray cats and dogs turned around and smiled at Luo Dance. Long time no see. You. Hello. Luo Dance's heart slightly jumped. She lowered her head and walked quickly in front of him, the club's boss Luo. You? What are you doing here? Luo Dance didn't know what to say, so she asked subconsciously. Feeding them. Luochio laughed. Didn't you see? That's right. Luo Dance was a little annoyed by her own question, so she quickly said, But, boss, shouldn't you be very busy? How can you have time? Luochio smiled. From today on, this city is closed. Luo Dance was stunned. When she was about to ask curiously, several stray cats and dogs gathered at her feet and rubbed against her. Luo Dance was delighted. She squatted down and wanted to hold up one of the kittens, but what she didn't expect was that this action, which she usually did, had a different situation today. The moment she squatted down, a button in front of her chest couldn't bear the pressure of this action, so it automatically popped out with a pop sound. Chapter 762. The pearl-colored button didn't have much force. Not to mention that Boss Luo couldn't understand his current state. He wouldn't feel any pain even when he was an ordinary person. After hitting Luochio's cheek, the button bounced off from Luochio's face. Finally, under the strange gazes of Luo Dance and the boss, the button slowly fell on the thin grass in the open space. The little butterfly monster felt that she had done something very rude. Her mind was blank at this moment. She had read a lot of magazines about the animal world. She knew that the brain structure of insects was relatively simple. She felt that she must be too simple at this moment. Otherwise, her mind wouldn't be blank. What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Don't you want to cover yourself first? Luocio suddenly said. Luo Dance was stunned. Then she looked down at her body. Because the button on her chest had popped off, the scenery inside her clothes had been directly exposed. After waking up this time, her inner clothes became unsuitable because of the increase of her breasts. She couldn't continue to wear them, so in fact, it was empty inside. Oh! Luo Dance lowered her head and stretched out her arms to cover the position of her chest. This appearance should be more attractive in the eyes of some people, right? What was it? Lust? Luocio looked at her slightly, but didn't pay too much attention. When the butterfly monster was born for the first time, she came to this new world naked. If she had any thoughts, she should have had them from that time. Wait a minute. Luocio smiled at this time. Luo Dance was stunned again. She didn't know the meaning of this sentence. But after a few seconds, Luo Dance understood that the so-called wait a minute was actually waiting for someone to appear. Master, Miss Dance. It was Miss Servant Girl of the club. Luo Dance vaguely felt that this big sister of the club, who was more beautiful than Sister Long and Sister Zijuan, seemed to have the ability to come to Boss Luo anytime and anywhere. This quiet big sister and Boss Luo were like the yin and yang magnets, never to be separated. Luo Dance suddenly had an idea. If she had this ability, would she be able to see the boss at any time? But at the same time, she felt that she was just a stupid and useless girl to her boss. Put this on first. Yi covered Luo Dance with a delicate blanket. Luo Dance realized that when the maid appeared, there was a folded blanket in her hand. In addition, Yi was holding an exquisite sewing kit in her hand. Luocio picked up the button on the ground and handed it to Yi. He smiled and said, "Fix it." "All right." Yi directly took it, then held the little butterfly's arm and pulled her up. She chuckled. "Let's go over there?" She pointed to a spot under a tree beside the empty field. How could Luo Dance say anything at this time? She felt like an ignorant, ugly duckling in front of the boss and the maid. She could only let the maid lead her and do whatever she wanted. Luocio didn't follow them. Instead, he opened a box of cat food and scattered it on the ground. He seemed to be in a good mood. "Can you take off your clothes?" Just as she sat down under the tree, the maid took out a checkered picnic cloth and spread it on the ground. "Ah!" The little butterfly blinked her eyes. Yi smiled and said, "It's more convenient when you fix it." Luo Dance nodded. Her hands began to fumble under the blanket, unbuttoning the rest of the buttons one by one. She felt liberated and her breath seemed to be smoother. When she went out today, she felt that the clothes were indeed smaller, which was very uncomfortable. After a while, she finally took off the clothes through the blanket and handed them out from under the blanket. Yi didn't say anything and took the clothes directly. Then she took out the needle and thread from the sewing bag and began to sew the clothes. Luo Dance suddenly remembered that she got drunk last time and vomited in front of Boss Luo. Although she couldn't control it and didn't know it at that time, she still felt guilty. Was it the same this time? "It seems that I've always caused trouble to you and Boss Luo." Luo Dance felt that she should apologize. In retrospect, it's actually a very interesting incident. Yi said softly. Interesting? Luo Dance was puzzled. Wouldn't this kind of thing only make people embarrassed? Miss Maid suddenly said, "Master, he likes you very much." Like? Luo Dance widened her eyes. The auntie in the bun shop said that if you like someone, you should say it out loud bravely. Miss Maid turned her eyes and looked at Boss Luo, who was feeding the cats and dogs in front of her. She smiled slyly, which made Luo Dance confused again. Luo Dance didn't know how to continue this topic. She only felt that her brain began to become blank again, and even had a feeling of dizziness. Master, he likes all the customers. Miss Maid said again at this time. Luo Dance suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, but she also felt a strange sense of loss. She felt not only relaxed but also empty in her heart. Then she became silent. The topic was suddenly interrupted here. Luo Dance looked at Miss Maid, who was skillfully doing the sewing work, while she looked at the cats and dogs in front of her. She suddenly smiled and said, Little Black and Little White also like Boss Luo very much. Yu Yi said noncommittally, probably because they are hungry. Master will come here to feed them when he is free. Luo Dance blinked and showed a puzzled expression. She remembered that her boss had come to this place before. Could it be that after that, her boss often came here? Miss Dance, you are not free for some time, right? Yu Yi said again. I'm sorry to trouble Boss Luo again. Luo Dance suddenly felt guilty. Yu Yi shook her head and looked at the cats and dogs. She said softly, They are wandering and don't belong to anyone. There is an old lady in the apartment next to us. Every night she will bring some leftovers. I know. I have met that old lady several times. Once, he even treated me to handmade candy. It was delicious. Little Butterfly's face had a smile and her embarrassed expression naturally faded. Well, try it on. Yu Yi put the clothes in front of Luo Dance and said, I took some of the clothes off the chest. Now it should not be too tight. It will be more convenient. Luo Dance put on the clothes with the blanket again. This time, the feeling of being tied to the chest was much less. Really? Thank you, big sister. She really admired this big sister. She was simply a synonym for omnipotence. How could there be such a perfect person in the world? After putting on the clothes again, Luo Dance returned the blanket to Yu Yi and quickly stood up again. Miss Maid cleaned up the plaid clothes on the ground and said, Then I will go back first. Miss Dance, you can continue to talk with Master. Ah? Go back? Yes. Yu Yi said casually, because the shop needs to be cleaned up so that it is convenient to move. It is not suitable to greet customers at this time. Otherwise, I will not mend your clothes here. I'm really sorry that I didn't invite you to the shop. Luo Dance quickly waved her hands. Yu Yi went to Luochio and said something. Then she disappeared directly. Luochio stood up at this time and clapped his hands casually to get rid of the residue of the cat food. Luo Dance quickly came over at this time and blurted out, Boss, are you really leaving? Luochio nodded and said, I plan to change the environment. Luo Dance didn't know what to think. She just had an impulse that she couldn't explain, so she subconsciously said, But isn't it good here? It's great here. Luochio shook his head. Luo Dance was even more puzzled. Luochio suddenly reached out at this time and found a long and narrow leaf in Luo Dance's hair. It should be from when she sat under the tree just now. Luo Dance suddenly became depressed and hesitated. Will you come back? I don't know. Luochio shook his head and suddenly said, But I will definitely come back. Did he mean that he would come back by himself and not with the shop? Luo Dance suddenly had a kind of understanding. That's it. Luochio smiled at this time. You've been out for too long. Miss Long will be worried about you. Luo Dance looked at the time and her face slightly changed. Really, it's this time? Oh no, it's too late to cook. I have to go back. With this, she quickly nodded to Luochio and then hurriedly ran out of this place. Luochio saw that she was completely out of the shop. But the next second, he saw her trotting back again. He saw that she dug in the bag and then took out a big bag of candy. This is for you and big sister, although it's not much. Thank you. Luochio didn't take the whole bag of candy, but just picked out 2 from it. Although the boss didn't accept the whole bag, Luo Dance still smiled. She glanced at the cats and dogs around, waved her hand and hurried away again. When she finally walked out, she turned back and said loudly, Next time, when you come back, let's feed them together, okay? Luochio smiled and nodded. Luo Dance then really left. At this time, Luochio picked up the empty food boxes for cats and dogs. Naturally, the boss wouldn't do such things as littering. But these stray cats and dogs raised their heads pitifully and looked at Boss Luo. Luocio thought for a moment and said indifferently, "Come at this time in the future. There will be food." It was not difficult for the boss to set a fixed time for food to appear here and let them eat at this time. The cats and dogs left reluctantly. After the third gold and silver card was embedded, in addition to a new projection in the second form of the altar, Luocio also got a new ability: to move the body of the club at will, that is, to relocate the club. The former boss also had this ability, but it was the ability accumulated in the long history of the previous boss. In this way, the gold and silver cards seemed to be greatly shortening the time for Luocio to get these things. Luocio didn't know whether this shortening was good or bad, but at least it seemed to be more convenient for now. When he returned to the store, Yu Yi was wearing an apron and carefully packing various kinds of liquor in the cabinet behind the counter in the lobby. There seemed to be a slight vibration when the club was moved. It would be bad if the liquor on the cabinet was broken, although this possibility was almost impossible. But Miss Maid had a very strong obsession with foolproof, so not only the liquor, but also everything here was packed. "You've packed so much?" Luocio sighed. If he did these things by himself, it might take several days, excluding the ability. It should be all done by tonight. Yu Yi came to the boss and poured him a glass of water. "Eat one of your candies." Luocio smiled and opened his palm. 2 candies were lying quietly in his palm. White rabbit creamy candy. At this time, a sharp scream came from upstairs. It was Taiyinzi, he said mournfully, who pulled out the network cable of this old Taoist. "The server is down. How can this old Taoist pretend to be cool?" "Adam, is it you?" The boss and Miss Maid smiled at each other. Luocio thought this smile was really beautiful. He unwrapped the wrapper of the white rabbit creamy candy and sent it to Yu Ye's mouth. He had permanently fixed Yu Ye's taste. Now Miss Maid's body was actually no different from a real human body, except that she couldn't give birth like a living creature. "Let me help you." Luocio rolled up his sleeves and began to pack things. He was used to doing housework at home, so it was natural for him to do these things. Luo Dance hurried back to the pet hospital. When she opened the back door and went in, she saw Long Shirua sitting in the empty hall silently. "Sorry, Sister Long, I'm late. I'll cook right away." Luo Dance picked up the apron and put it on while walking upstairs. The kitchen was upstairs. "Girl, come here for a moment." Long Shirua suddenly called her. Luo Dance came to Long Shirua obediently. "Sister Long, what's wrong? Are you hungry?" "Humph. I'm Kelowna Shinryu. Do you think I'll be hungry?" Long Shirua subconsciously retorted. "Coo!" Suddenly there was a very discordant sound that made the air quiet. It came from Kelowna Shinryu, who claimed that she wouldn't be hungry. I'll cook right away." Luo Dance's face turned pale. Long Shirua was also desperate. What could she do? At this moment she could only pretend that she didn't know anything. She coughed twice and looked at the ceiling. "Let's wait for a while. I have something to tell you first. Tonight you'll prepare for a long trip with me in the middle of the night." Where? Chapter 763. Since Mo Xiaofei began to practice in the underground training ground of the pet hospital, Long Shirua gave Mo Xiaofei a key so that he could enter the hospital easily. After Christmas, classes started immediately the next day. Because of the approaching final exam, the school began to make up lessons in private. Mo Xiaofei spent most of his energy on cultivation during this period of time. Although he didn't lag too much in his classes, if he didn't attend, it would be hard for him to explain if the school called his parents. Therefore, he didn't come over for a day. In addition, because he was worried about the class monitor's health, Mo Xiaofei specially observed her for a whole day and 2 nights. Seeing that her complexion gradually recovered, he was relieved. Today, after making up lessons as usual, he came to the pet hospital. Including the Christmas holiday, he had not come here to practice for 3 days. Of course, The time in Yen Wuyue's world was not counted. No one? Teacher? Entering from the back of the hospital, Emo Xiaofei saw that the lights were not turned on and there was no sound. He couldn't find Long Shirua here, nor did he see Zixing and the other two greedy wolf clan warriors. He couldn't help but feel strange. Emo Xiaofei frowned and directly opened the entrance to the underground training ground. He thought that maybe they had something to do and left temporarily, so he didn't think too much about it. But when he walked into the training ground, he saw a guy who came here earlier than him, Zhuefeng. At this time, Zhuefeng's body kept flashing and moving on the huge training ground. If Emo Xiaofei didn't strengthen his eyesight, he couldn't even catch the landing point of Zhuefeng. At this time, Zhuefeng's body was soaked in sweat. It seemed that he had been here for some time. When Emo Xiaofei came back on Christmas night, he had heard from Long Shirua that Zhuefeng would also join the training. Therefore, he was just surprised and didn't feel strange. Zhuefeng! He shouted to the front. Zhuefeng heard him and stopped. He raised his hand to wipe the sweat on his forehead. Seeing Emo Xiaofei, he smiled. Brother? You're here. When I came here, I didn't see anyone, so I came down by myself and did some warm-up exercises. Looking at Zhuefeng's wet clothes, if this was just a warm-up exercise. Emo Xiaofei smiled. This guy Zhuefeng seemed to be very hard-working. He couldn't neglect him. Purple Star seems to be gone? Emo Xiaofei suddenly asked curiously. Zhuefeng's face was a little gloomy, but it quickly disappeared. He nodded and said, I know. She left me a note, saying that she had something important to do and had to leave. Emo Xiaofei pretended to be indifferent and gave a note. He sighed inwardly. Probably Zhuefeng's relationship had died before it started. It was probably just a one-sided love. By the way, I found a letter here. It's for you, big brother. Zhuefeng hurriedly walked to the side. He picked up a white envelope from a sofa. This sofa was Long Shirua's special seat. Now that she was here alone, it seemed a little lonely. Emo Xiaofei took the envelope and opened it. He glanced at it quickly and frowned. This letter didn't explain too much. Long Shirua simply explained a few words. She said that she had something to deal with, so she went out for a few months. During this time, the hospital wouldn't be open. She asked him to clean it when he had time. In addition, she asked him and Zhuefeng not to fall behind in their cultivation. She had found another guy to watch over him and Zhuefeng's cultivation. Emo Xiaofei told the contents of the letter to Zhuefeng. A few months? That will be over soon. Wind-chasing wolf didn't care much about it. Although he looked like he was only 14 or 15 years old, his real age was several times that. A few months really didn't feel that long to him. But I don't know who will guide us? I hope it's a powerful guy. If he's too weak, hee. Looking at Zhuefeng clenching his fists and making a ferocious look, Emo Xiaofei couldn't help smiling. This kid was still competitive. But at this moment, Emo Xiaofei's pores all over his body suddenly stood erect. His extraordinary sixth sense made him feel a terrifying danger approaching. He looked up abruptly, only to see a large number of horrible light balls appearing densely above. These light balls were dazzling and were the size of 2 tennis balls. At this moment, these light balls suddenly shot down. The dense light balls flew toward Zhuefeng and Emo Xiaofei. Emo Xiaofei was shocked. He crossed his hands in front of him and set up a psychic wall in front of him. One of the light balls hit Emo Xiaofei's psychic wall first, and then made a loud noise. Emo Xiaofei felt like he was hit by a car at high speed. It was very difficult to block one light ball. But in front of him, there were no less than 100 light balls. And above these light balls, Emo Xiaofei vaguely saw a figure. Zhuefeng seemed to have noticed the existence of this figure. He snorted coldly and used his lightning speed to dodge all the light balls with the help of the terrain here. He climbed up the wall and then quickly jumped toward the figure. No matter who you are, how dare you sneak attack me, Zhuefeng? Ha! Bang! Emo Xiaofei couldn't see clearly what had happened. He was busy defending against these powerful light balls. At the same time, he saw wind-chasing Wolf's body being hit by that figure and smashed hard on the ground, causing the ground to crack. Xuefeng. I'm fine. Xuefeng climbed up from the pit awkwardly, but the corner of his mouth was overflowing with blood. Xuefeng looked at the figure in the sky with a solemn expression and said solemnly, "Brother, be careful. This guy is very powerful." At this moment, the figure slowly landed. Emo Xiaofei finally saw it clearly. It was a guy wearing a coat and a hat. This guy lowered the brim of his hat so low that only his chin could be seen. "Brother, let's deal with him together." With that, Xuefeng activated his lightning speed again. Emo Xiaofei looked at the slight tilt of the opponent's chin and suddenly shouted, "Xuefeng, stop! This senior is not a bad guy." "What?" Xuefeng stopped his body abruptly. Because it was too fast, a long trace was left on the ground. Emo Xiaofei took a deep breath and said, "Senior, are you the expert that teacher invited to guide us?" "Huh? Expert? Ha ha." When the man in the coat heard it, his tone became weird. "Ha! I like this name. Yes, I'm an expert. Ha! May I ask who you are?" Emo Xiaofei asked cautiously. He instinctively felt that this strange guy was very powerful and very dangerous. "I'm Sun Shaoxing, who is known as Brother Shaoxing in the martial arts world." This guy took off his hat, revealing a monkey face. The two long sideburns were particularly eye-catching. He was the owner of the Elysium Bar, Sun Shaoxing. Sun Shaoxing looked at Emo Xiaofei at this time and said, "You're not bad. You can block my attack." As he said, he looked at Xuefeng again. "Your speed is okay, but in my opinion, it's still too slow." Sun Shaoxing. Xuefeng was shocked at this time. His face was full of awe, then he lowered his head and became a little cautious. Xuefeng greets Master Sun. In the demon clan, the strong were respected. Sun Shaoxing, as a grand demon, had long been famous. Xuefeng didn't know how much he had improved after getting the inheritance, but obviously, he was far from the Grand Demon's opponent. Otherwise, he would not be easily knocked down by the opponent. It was not that he was afraid of Sun Shaoxing, but he respected the Demon Clan powerhouse. There was a faint fighting spirit burning in his heart. In the future, he could do it too. "Have you seen me?" Sun Shaoxing glanced at Xuefeng curiously. Xuefeng nodded, then smiled and said, "This kid has sneaked into the bar several times and secretly met you a few times." "Hee ha ha. Interesting." Sun Shaoxing blinked his eyes quickly a few times. "Do you think I don't receive underage people? How could you sneak in?" This kid took advantage of the fact that Master Ghost Child happened to be absent several times, so I found the opportunity. Xuefeng did not hide. Strictly speaking, Ghost Child was not Sun Xiaoxing's subordinate. Ghost Child only listened to the orders of Chichi Kamaya. He usually guarded the bar when he had nothing to do, but there were times when he went out under orders, so Sun Shaoxing did not doubt it. "You know how to have fun at such a young age, huh? I like you. You don't have to follow the rules when you come to my bar in the future. I will protect you in the future." Sun Shaoxing waved his hand generously. "Also, the drinks are half price. No, free of charge." Sun Shaoxing narrowed his eyes and suddenly looked at Emo Xiaofei. "Human kid, you too?" Emo Xiaofei was dumbfounded. Was this guy here to guide them in their cultivation or to recruit underlings? Sun Shaoxing laughed in his heart at this time. Naturally, he had other ideas. He had a party in the bar last night, and he was having a good time, but he was inexplicably caught by someone. The furious Brother Shaoxing was about to launch an attack, but he suddenly saw that the person who caught him was Kelowna Shinryu Long Shirua. He was stunned. It was true that he was belligerent, but he had to pick someone whose level was about the same. It was rumored that he had the ability to fight with Kelowna Shinryu, but only he knew that Kelowna Shinryu was really powerful. Even 5 of him would not be her opponent. Long Shirua directly said that she had something to do and asked him to come here to guide the two little guys. If this matter was done well, she would consider creating an opportunity for him and Su Zijuan to get along in the future. Brother Xiaosheng was so excited when he heard it. Of course, he agreed. Looking at the dumbfounded Mo Xiaofei and the eager Zhuifeng, Sun Xiaosheng laughed in his heart at this time. Ha, that old lady Long actually asked me to come here to teach these two little guys. It seems that she thinks highly of them. This old lady loves her face. If I teach these two guys well, as the saying goes, people need face and tree bark. If I make any request in the future, it will naturally be difficult to refuse. Thinking that not only could he get the opportunity to be alone with Su Zijuan, but he might even be able to go further with her, Brother Xiaosheng's heart was burning. Mo Xiaofei looked at Sun Xiaosheng's gaze, and he shuddered all of a sudden. I always feel that this guy is looking at me with a very strange aggressiveness. Teacher, what is the background of the temporary substitute teacher that you found? In the Middle East, in a cave in a mountainous area, Su Zijuan slowly opened her eyes, but suddenly shuddered. It was really strange for someone with her strength to shudder. It was just that she was not in Kelowna now. 2 days ago, she was successfully attacked by the guys from the club, so she began to pay attention to the transcendence outside Kelowna. The toxin is suppressed, but it will take a few days to clear it. I can't stay here for a long time. She regarded this shudder as a possible threat approaching. Now the toxin in her body had not been completely removed. If she encountered any situation, she naturally could not go all out. Getting up, Su Zijuan quickly left this place under the cover of the night. Rio, Brazil, one of the slums of more than 700 people. The area was so dense that it looked like it was piled up with blocks. The distance between many buildings was only an arm's length, and there were even more densely packed areas. The wires in the area were like a spider's web, filling every place that could be seen. They were very low, as if they were within reach. Luochio wore a simple white t-shirt and trousers, coupled with a pair of sneakers without any brand, and walked casually in this slum. 2 days had just passed since Christmas, but because it was in the north and south, the weather in Rio at this time was still sultry. Originally, according to the principle of doing as the Romans do, Boss Luo should wear shorts and slippers, but under the strong request of Miss Maid, the slippers could not be worn in the end. Heat and cold naturally had no effect on Luochio. He had no special requirements for what he wore, so he just let it be. He still deprived ordinary people of their perception of him, making himself a person with no sense of existence. Luochio and Miss Maid walked leisurely in the streets of this slum. It wasn't like the rumors said, where even during the day one could see gunshots, murders, and other crimes everywhere in this place. But it might also be because it was still daytime, and the evil in this city was still sleeping. Luochio walked up a high slope and looked into the distance, where the land called Monte Cristo was. At this time, God was opening his hands. It was not known whether he was embracing the city, the people, or something else. Here. Luochio pointed at a grocery store next to him. Miss Maid looked over curiously. In front of the grocery store, a dark-skinned old woman was sitting in front of the grocery store, dozing off. A few barefooted children wearing only shorts were looking at the snacks on the shelves of the grocery store with shining eyes. Miss Maid nodded at this time. There is a market not far away. It is convenient to buy ingredient. Luochio smiled. He did not consider buying ingredient. He chose this place casually, but it was in line with Yu Ye's wishes. Luochio waved his hand, and the space in front of him vibrated quietly. A strange 3-story building appeared out of thin air, replacing the grocery store. The building was old, with a pine door, and the name of the store was written in front of the door, Trafford's Club. Luochio pushed open the pine door in front of the store and walked in. Chapter 764. Speaking of which, it was the first time for Luo Dance to take such a ride. She felt that human beings really had amazing talents in the field of science and technology. The high-speed train with a speed of more than 250 kilometers per hour was beyond the reach of many monsters. Moreover, such a train could carry at least hundreds of passengers, which was difficult for monsters to do. It was said that there was a giant Kuan Pring in the ancient monster bloodline with unfathomable wings. Perhaps it could carry hundreds of people easily? Although Luo Dance felt that the monster race was at a disadvantage, the scenery along the way of the high-speed train had deeply attracted this butterfly monster who was taking the high-speed train for the first time. Long Shirua was actually very rich, otherwise she would not have been able to maintain a pet hospital for so long. However, she didn't show off her wealth, so Luo Dance didn't know how extravagant it was for the two of them to book the first-class cabin of the high-speed train. Of course, there were not many first-class cabins. For example, there were only 5 seats in this train. Looking at Luo Dance pressing her hands on the broken window of the train, her face almost touching the glass, and then raising her hips excitedly, Long Shirua suddenly felt lucky that she had booked this place. At first, she didn't like to sit in the same carriage with too many people, so she didn't choose the first-class seat. Now she felt lucky. Fortunately, no one saw Luo Dance like this. Kelowna's Shinryu really didn't know where to put her face. Long Shirua thought that if the stewardess suddenly came in and saw this scene, she would feel very uncomfortable, so she resolutely slapped Luo Dance's buttocks with her palm. Because this body wasn't big, using all of his strength like this wouldn't cause any pain. But with a pause sound, Luo Dance felt a vibration from her buttocks. Like ripples, the vibration spread on the skin of her buttocks covered by clothes and disappeared. Luo Dance turned around, looking at Long Shirua confusedly, not knowing why Sister Long just touched her. Long Shirua stared at her fiercely at this time, then said fiercely, "Sit down. I have something to tell you." Luo Dance felt that Sister Long's fierceness was much cuter than that of Sister Suzy Juan. She couldn't help but want to hug Sister Long and rub against her. "Sister Long, what do you want to say?" Looking at Luo Dance blinking her eyes, she didn't seem to be serious at all. She was afraid that this girl would never learn to be serious. Long Shirua sighed and said, "This trip to Mount Tai, we may run into some troublesome matters. It's not convenient for me to make a move right now, so I'm afraid there will be a time when I need you to deal with it. Now that you've returned, your demonic power has increased by quite a bit. You've faintly reached the level of a high-grade demon, but there's still a barrier before you can truly become a high-grade demon. Don't underestimate this obstacle. Its difference is the fundamental difference between high-level monsters and mid-level monsters." Luo Dance blinked her eyes. She didn't understand. Long Shirua's forehead faintly twitched. "In short, I'll help you grow into a high-level monster. You just need to do as I say." This was simple. Luo Dance, who thought she was very obedient, nodded quickly. Long Shirua paused and said seriously, "I'll help you with your cultivation after we get off the high-speed train. Now I'll tell you the purpose of this trip while we're on the train." Knowing that Sister Long suddenly went out for an urgent matter, Luo Dance listened attentively at this time. Someone found a suspected cave residence of the great Emperor of Dongyu on Mount Tai. Long Shirua recalled the content of the phone call Chichikamaya made to her not long ago. Luo Dance had heard of the name of the great Emperor of Dongyu, but only from the deceased Grandpa Tree Monster. At that time, she was young and didn't pay much attention to it. She just knew that it was a mythical figure. The great Emperor of Dongyu, the legendary emperor who manages the souls of the dead? Luo Dance told her limited knowledge. Long Shirua nodded, yes. The 10 kings of hell and the 18 layers of hell that we often talk about are collectively called the Netherworld. The great Emperor of Dongyu is the only lord of the Netherworld. Now, the Netherworld has been closed for a long time. The reincarnation path of this world has been interrupted long ago. This is extremely abnormal. In the long run, even humanity will die out. This time, the discovery of the cave residence left by the great Emperor of Dong, you may be able to solve the mystery of the Netherworld. Long Shiruo was the Shinryu protector of Kelowna. In fact, she had been secretly investigating the mystery of the Netherworld's closure over these years. However, in this world, everyone had their own position. As the Shinryu protector, she was responsible for protecting this world. And the one who managed the souls of the dead was naturally another one. In short, the great emperor of Dongyu and the Shinryu protector of Kelowna were at the same level in terms of karmic position. Of course, this was only a part of the Taoist theory. This time, Chichikamaya called to inform her of this matter. He also said that the area of Mount Tai was currently in chaos. The end of the world. Some of the big shots in the circle had already felt the world's loathing of the transcendence. They knew that their future was full of troubles and could end at any time. Therefore, when they saw the cave residence of the ancient great emperor, they all took action to fight for it. They hoped to find a trace of opportunity in the cave residence left behind by the great emperor. Now, the area of Mount Tai was in chaos. People and demons were at loggerheads. They were constantly probing each other and winning continuously. There was friction from time to time. And this news spread like wildfire. Even some people who left the country because of the war in the early years seemed to have quietly returned. If this matter wasn't controlled well, this country's well-hidden transcendence would be in danger of exposing itself to the world at any time. At that time, even the country's machinery might not be able to seal the news with all its might. However, Long Shiruo was very puzzled. The great emperor of Dongyu was also known as the god of Mount Tai. According to legend, he attained the Tao on Mount Tai. If he did leave a cave residence on Mount Tai, why hadn't anyone discovered the existence of the cave residence over the years? Every 10 years there would be a Penglai conference on Mount Tai. This time, was the discovery of the cave residence of the great emperor of Dongyu and Penglai. Was there any connection? Long Shiruo made many guesses in her heart, but she still had no clue. She looked at the obedient little butterfly monster in front of her. She didn't change much in this trip. Every time she used her power, she could only use it for a few minutes. After that, she needed to rest for a period of time. She was afraid that she could only rely on how much help Luo Dance could give her, but could this girl really do it? At first, she planned to tie Sun Xiaoxing up, but considering Sun Xiaoxing's character of wanting to see the world in chaos, she was afraid that bringing this guy along would only make things more unpredictable. So, she gave up. Every big monster, especially the guy who had the qualifications to become the Monster King, which one of them wasn't unique and unruly. Sun Xiaoxing could be suppressed by Long Shiruo every time. First, it was because of her identity and strength as the Shinryu, which really suppressed Sun Xiaoxing. Second, it was because Sun Xiaoxing was stubborn and obsessed with Su Zijuan. However, if it was related to that trace of illusory opportunity, it would probably be a completely different story. I must not let Sun Xiaoxing know my current state. Long Shiruo secretly became vigilant. During the conversation, the door of the first-class cabin suddenly opened. The stewardess came in with food and asked very politely. Luo Dance blinked her eyes and pointed to her lips. The first thing she asked was, "Is there milk?" This girl really couldn't be nervous? A dock in Hong Kong. The night completely covered the surroundings with black color. Wang Yuechuan alone carried a luggage bag and had been waiting here for more than an hour. According to 18's order, he came to Hong Kong. After hiding in this place for 2 days, he received 18's order again. According to the content of the order, he would take the boat of arrangement tonight and sneak into the territory of Thailand. After entering Thailand, he would have a new identity to start the mission. Without any support, and even starting in this way from the beginning, Wang Yuechuan felt that the road ahead was full of difficulties. But because of this, Wang Yuechuan was more and more convinced about the next mission. After all, in his opinion, who would be so bored to use so many forces to send a wanted criminal out and then arrange for him to sneak in? And the international mercenary group that he needed to contact in the future? Moreover, He had already confirmed it with his adoptive father and leader through the phone at the beginning. Wang Yuechuan sighed. At this time, he had lost his original phone number. According to 18th's order, he needed to abandon everything that could prove his identity. Even from the moment he arrived in Hong Kong, he never contacted his adoptive father again. At this time, the sea level in front of him suddenly flashed a few times. Wang Yuechuan knew that it was a secret signal from the smuggler's flashlight. The light source flashed one after another in Morse code, which meant that he could safely board the boat at this time. After a while, a small boat drove to the dock. There was only a man in his 30s. Wang Yuechuan said a few words to the other party. After confirming the identity of both parties, he immediately returned to the fishing boat that was still at sea. "Why are you going to Thailand?" The man driving the boat seemed to ask a question. He used very bad Mandarin, commonly known as Hong Kong Mandarin. Of course, most of the people who were smuggled out by him had committed some crime. He didn't particularly want to know, just because he was curious. Wang Yuechuan didn't say anything. He glanced at the man and closed his eyes. The man didn't blame him. He knew that the man who came up must be in a very bad mood. If not, no one would be willing to leave home. "Do you have a cigarette?" Wang Yuechuan suddenly opened his eyes and glanced at the boatman. "Yes." The man casually took out a pack of red Marlboros from a soft box and gave one to Wang Yuechuan. He even lit the cigarette for him. "You smoke too?" "I don't think you smoke." His fingers, his teeth, naturally, there were no traces of being a smoker. The boatman's eyes were also quite sharp. At this time, Wang Yuechuan said indifferently, "I will smoke in the future." He held the cigarette and took a puff. The spicy taste began to invade his throat, making him feel unusually uncomfortable. He couldn't help but frown. The boatman suddenly realized that this man's frown was actually quite manly. Wang Yuechuan didn't think about the boatman's thoughts at this time. He just began to take a second puff of the cigarette and began to adapt to the spicy taste. At the same time, he began to recall the information about the mercenary group that he would need to contact next. It was called yokai. On the other hand, yokai recruited mostly retired soldiers from the elite forces of various countries or war criminals. The scale was not large, and there were always only 99 members. Unless one of the 99 members died, no new members would be recruited. This time, yokai planned to recruit 2 new members because 2 members died unexpectedly during a mercenary mission. On the dock, a black shadow that completely blended into the night watched the small boat gradually leave at this time. He laughed strangely twice and then disappeared. Naturally, it was Black Soul Envoy 18 from the club. This time, Luochio didn't bring 18 and Taisetsu with him when the club moved. For some unknown reason, Luochio allowed 18 to move freely and gave her the authority to open a critical door. In other words, if 18 wished to go to a place, she could open a critical door in that place. In the future, she could directly pull in investors for the club through the critical door. This place could be the former territory of 18, or she could find another place. It was all up to her preference. There was no time limit for her, and she didn't have to hand in the investor's information card before opening the door. This was a way to take a vacation in disguise. 18 felt that the new master's order to her this time could be described as a reward. It was just that she thought about it for a long time. Logically speaking, she failed once with Zhu Maolin, the investor. It was already fortunate that there was no punishment. Naturally, the reward was unimaginable. However, the authority to open the critical door had been imprinted on her, so 18 had to believe all this. She thought hard for a while, and finally vaguely felt that the new master's reward for her was probably related to her secretly protecting Ren Xiling at the beginning. Since I can find the opening location of the critical door at will, and there is no time limit for me. 18 was in a good mood at this time. Naturally, the first thing she considered was how to raise a magician that she was very optimistic about. So, Sister 18, we are also going to Thailand next? Suddenly, Taisetsu's voice came from behind 18. Hearing this voice, 18's good mood instantly became irritable. She couldn't help but think of the last sentence the boss said before leaving. Taisetsu, I will leave the rest to you. But after all, it was the master's order. It was supreme, so it was not up to 18 to say no. I heard that there are many transvestites in Thailand? TSK, I am also considered going abroad, right? Taisetsu was wearing beach pants and a straw hat at this time, looking completely like a tourist. 18 suddenly criticized in her heart. Master, why do you want me to take this burden with me? Rio, Brazil. The packaged items had been unpacked one by one, and the maid was putting them back to their original positions. Luochu felt that he shouldn't be idle, so he took the initiative to pick up the rag and wipe the windows in front of the club. Behind him was the streets of the slums. Although it was called a street, it was actually a winding staircase. Opposite the grocery store where the club's new address was originally located, there was a barber shop. The distance between the two was less than 3 meters, but this was already a relatively spacious section of this staircase. The boss exhaled at the mirror of the cupboard. After wiping it, he felt satisfied and stopped. He planned to return to the hall, but his gaze shifted and he suddenly saw a shoe hanging from a nearby telephone pole. He didn't know when it had been hanging there. Luochu remembered that no one had ever hung a shoe before. According to the rules of some places here, hanging a shoe was a signal. There were drugs for sale here, or there would be a drug transaction or something like that. It was said that there were many slums controlled by drug dealers here. Luochu thought that the one he had picked seemed to be one of the drug dealers' territories that even the police had no right to enter. Maybe something interesting will happen. Luochu suddenly had such a thought before entering the door, but this might be an unexpected surprise, right? Originally, he didn't intend to live here for a long time. He just planned to stay here for a short time before the Lunar New Year to figure out some things. Chapter 765. The last time he returned to his hometown, it was because of Grandma Xiaochun's critical illness. In the end, Grandma Xiaochun passed away without regret. Luochu also learned some things about his life from Grandma Xiaochun. His father, Luo Qi, turned out not to be his grandfather's biological son, but an adopted child. Luochu didn't know if his father had told anyone about his life. It was even doubtful whether he knew about it himself. However, it did not stop Luochu from being curious about his life. The relevant personnel who adopted Luo Qi had now passed away. There were no clues left at that time. Luochu wanted to pursue it, but in the end, he could only use the altar's magical intelligence ability. The altar at the bottom of the club naturally did not disappoint him. It finally locked on to the location of the person who had the same blood as Luo Qi. It was in South America, that was the country where he landed the club. This was not a journey to find his route. Luochu knew long ago that Luo village was his route. It was also the route of his late father. Luo Qi had never told his son, Luochu, anything about his life. He must have made a decision in his heart long ago. Now, Luochu's emotions were indifferent. There was only one person in the world that he cared about. For the so-called true relatives of the same origin, he did not see where they were. In his opinion, the composition of family was the accumulation of time. The vagrants on the streets did not know each other and were not related by blood. However, after living together for a long time, they relied on each other and supported each other. After a long time, they probably felt like family and called each other family. What was wrong with that? Luochu just wanted to explore the truth. Why was his father, Luo Qi, abandoned? Was it intentional, or was he forced? The altar should be able to give Luochu the answer in this regard. But as a son, he had to find the answer himself. There were some things that he had to do personally, not because of stubbornness, but because it was his obligation as a son. Luochu could still feel this obligation. Only then did he feel that there was still a part of him as a human. Yu Yi naturally knew why the boss was here. Miss Maid would support her boss's decision without any hesitation. However, once the club opened, it meant that it needed to open. In that case, neither she nor Luocio, as the boss, would be able to control the business. Although there was a way to delay the Black Soul envoys from handing in their patron cards, there was no way to stop the customers who spontaneously walked into the club when they were lost, because this was a part of the future. As the owner, Luocio had the authority to suspend the business, but it was not an indefinite suspension. There was also a time limit. In this regard, it was somewhat similar to how employees had a fixed amount of annual leave each year and could use it at will within a year. Suspending business was similar to a kind of vacation for the boss. Luocio naturally couldn't use up the suspended business time just to find the truth of the past. Therefore, after choosing a new location for the club, business immediately resumed. What was even more ridiculous was that the time of this relocation was actually within the time limit of the suspension of business. Once again, the altar indicated that it was naturally not a good thing. However, if the main body of the club was here, it could move freely in this city and a large area nearby. Naturally, it would be much more convenient. Who would deliberately suspend business? In the evening, when they had just finished packing up the items in the hall, there was a sudden storm outside. For this harbor city, this was nothing new. Moreover, it was summer now. Because of the arrival of the rain, the heat seemed to have subsided a little. Boss Luo opened the door and took a look. This place was extremely crowded with buildings. The sky was dense with dark clouds and the ground was heavy with rain. It looked like a place without light. It seems that we should wait until tomorrow to go out. Luocio looked back at Yu Yi. Boss Luo was a person who didn't like to go out in the rain, even if the rain couldn't interfere with him. Yu Yi nodded and began to fiddle with the old gramophone in the corner and the vinyl discs in the cabinet. Vinyl discs needed to be regularly maintained. Otherwise, they would be easily worn out and the sound quality would naturally be poor. "Master, what do you want to play?" Yu Yi took out an album. Luocio smiled and sat on a rocking chair by the window. He opened a local travel guide and started to read. Miss Maid knew that this was the master's intention to let her make the decision. Her beautiful eyes swept through the vinyl discs and finally picked out a jazz disc. The singer was Javan. Soft music sounded. The exotic male voice made the sudden rain seem less irritating. Luocio thought for a while and said, "Make some red wine and then match it with some cheese." "Okay." When Miss Maid was about to enter the kitchen, the club's bell in the hall suddenly rang rapidly. Almost at the same time when the bell rang, a flustered figure rushed into the hall. On such a hot day, it was so wet that one could even feel a chill from the other's body. The boss put down the tourist brochure that had just opened a few pages. Miss Maid also stopped and looked at the flustered intruder. The intruder was panting and anxious. As soon as she came in, she quickly closed the door and leaned her body against the door. Then she quickly looked around the club's hall. A wet girl with long brown wavy hair, about 18 or 19 years old. She was a relatively common white person in this country. Maybe she was from the Portuguese country when the country was integrated. She looked outside anxiously, as if she was worried that something would come near her. Luocio looked outside through the glass of the window and found that on the dark street, several men with flashlights were searching for something in the rain. They didn't find anything, so they continued to search nearby while cursing. But the wet girl strangely found that the men outside didn't seem to find her hiding in the shop. It was strange. But no matter what, she had indeed escaped danger. Thus, she looked at the only man and woman in this place, and after a slight surprise, she revealed a smile that she thought was relaxed. She blinked and said, "Can you let me sit here for a while? Don't worry, I'll pay you." After a short time of being surprised, Luocio put down the tourist brochure in his hand, stood up and smiled. "We never charge for entertaining guests here." "Really?" The girl was stunned and looked around again. The interior decoration style of the shop was totally different from the slums outside. She could see that everything here seemed to have a long history. Even if it wasn't, it was still valuable. She once had the opportunity to walk into the manor of a rich man, who showed off some valuable things. But it seemed to be incomparable with this place. Of course, it was just her intuition. She didn't have any research on antique. Even if a really valuable painting was placed in front of her, it was not as practical as a stack of money. In addition, she was more curious about the fact that even if the things here were fake, they must have cost a lot. Was the owner of this shop a fool? How could he show such wealth in such a place? Speaking of which, when did this shop open? She didn't seem to have any impression before. Moreover, this shop seemed to be very rich. It was even more strange that it could be safe and sound. This man looked like an Asian. And this maid seemed to be of mixed race? The girl had a lot of guesses in her mind, but her expression gradually calmed down. It was probably because the threat from the outside world had temporarily left, which made her proud and relaxed. Oh really? That's great. Hearing the shop owner's words, the girl found a stool to sit down and began to wring the clothes on her body. Water flowed out of the clothes and slid to the ground, creating a puddle. Only then did she remember that this was not her place, so she looked at Luaccio with some uneasiness. It's okay. Luaccio shook his head. Do you need to change your clothes? We can provide it for you. Is there no charge? The girl suddenly asked. She seemed to be unexpectedly obsessed with money, but Luaccio still shook his head. However, the girl didn't seem to believe that such a good thing would happen. She felt that this might be a trap. In the slums, there were too many traps. If one was not careful, he or she would fall into it at any time. So she quickly shook her head. Let's have a drink. Boss Luo didn't mind and ordered the servant girl, prepare a drink for this lady. This was in Luaccio's mother tongue, but the girl obviously couldn't understand it and immediately showed a vigilant look. Luaccio glanced at her and said apologetically, Sorry, I just came here and am not used to your language. Relax, I just asked her to get you something hot to drink. I think you will need to drink something hot now. The girl was stunned. Just came here? If not for his accent, she would have thought that the shop owner was born and raised here. The girl nodded hesitantly, then looked at Luaccio with vigilance and continued to wring the water stains on her clothes. Since he said that he didn't mind, she naturally wouldn't let her clothes get wet. Wasn't that asking for trouble? You are pretending to be generous, don't blame me. Soon, the young girl brought over a steaming hot drink and placed it in front of the girl. She sniffed and then frowned, feeling that the smell was a bit pungent. The maid whispered at this time, This is ginger tea, it can drive away the cold. This is a very good drink in my master's hometown. The girl took it, but didn't drink it. She just held the warm cup with both hands, purely to warm herself. She still looked outside anxiously. Through the glass of the cupboard, the girl could see that the men outside were now knocking on the doors of the shops. It suddenly became chaotic outside. But what surprised her was that this eye-catching shop seemed to be ignored by the men outside. She clearly saw a man walking past here, but it was as if he couldn't be seen. Why don't they come in? The girl was suddenly a little surprised. She clearly knew the background of the men outside who caught her. Even if this place looked like a place for rich people, it should be more popular. Could it be that the owner of this shop had a background that made the men outside afraid? If there is no need, they won't come in today. The shop owner said directly, Of course, I'm not sure if they will come in the future. There will always be a time when we need them. The girl frowned. She couldn't understand such words, but it didn't prevent her from interpreting it as, the men outside wouldn't come in tonight, as long as she stayed here, she would be safe. She turned her eyes and suddenly said, Can I stay here for the night? Stay here for the night? Luaccio repeated the girl's request. Because the girl came in too suddenly, he didn't have time to introduce the management of the club. Yes, stay here for the night. The girl stood up. She felt more and more that this young Oriental should have some ability. He wasn't afraid of the men outside, or he should have handed her over at the first moment. To avoid danger? Luocio nodded. If so, we can't charge you the usual fee. Simply staying here for the night, but as a protection, naturally, there were two different fees. But the girl seemed to have expected this answer. Before Boss Luo finished his words, she said first, I don't think you are short of money, so I don't plan to give you money. But I can give you something else, and I promise you will be satisfied. Really? Luocio was sure that this girl was quite interesting. Every customer was different. It could be considered as a kind of joy in the boring business negotiations. Luocio smiled and said, For example, what is it? My service. The girl suddenly stood up. Because her clothes were wet from the rain, now they directly stuck to every inch of her skin. This girl had almost no excess fat on her body, and her figure was unusually hot, like a samba girl on the poster. Service? Luocio was stunned. Yes, my service. The girl smiled. I have some confidence in my appearance, maybe not as good as the one next to you, but I think my skills will be much better than hers. Every single one of my customers would never forget my skills, and they would always point to me. Men all like me. Very confident. This was the first professional type that Luocio met. And my ventriloquism is better. The girl suddenly licked her mouth. I can suck it out in 3 minutes. Chapter 766. As the name implied, sex workers were naturally sex workers. There was no room for further analysis from the text. Of course, because of the country's strange laws, this industry was barely legal. Because according to the laws of this country, sex and money transactions were legal. However, it was illegal to organize sex activities or be hired as sex workers. The government's unclear laws made it seem like the government neither encouraged nor prohibited it. But now, in this city and even the country as a whole, there were so many sex workers that it was shocking. Therefore, their existence did indeed bring indescribable benefits to the economy. Luocio was not surprised that he would meet a sex worker here. After all, when a world sports event was held in this city not long ago, there was an influx of sex workers. Conquest had to pay attention to it and even organized training classes for basic etiquette training. But the first guest, who had just finished moving, was a sex worker. Well, how should he put it? This energetic girl's aggressive speech made Boss Luo suddenly have a sign of confusion. He thought about it for a moment. Due to the fact that his life was quite regular, he had never been approached by a sex worker before. He subconsciously observed Yu Yi. This observation was not a simple sight, but another kind of vision on the spiritual level. Yu Yi still maintained a calm smile, excellent etiquette. This smile was so dreamy that Luocio even felt that it was deliberate and lacked naturalness. Because as the boss, he was superior to all the employees in the club, so Boss Luo could even feel the fluctuation of the ultimate soul that existed in this puppet. Humanization. Sir, what do you think? It seemed that seeing Luocio's hesitation, the girl even said more aggressive words. If you think one time is not enough, I can even let you have at least 3 orgasms a night. The maid's eyelids twitched slightly, and the arc of her smile seemed to be slightly bigger. Luocio suddenly thought of Nero. This divine champion named Tyrant also teased him a little at first, but it was more of a prank. Unlike the girl in front of him, she seemed to do this kind of teasing as a job, almost instinctively. Caroline, 19 years old, birthday on March 18th. Boss Luo said abruptly. He said the girl's name. The girl. Caroline widened her eyes at this time and looked at Luocio. Then she frowned and thought about something in surprise. Finally, she asked in confusion, Sir, have I done business with you before? Her idea was very simple. If this person could call out her name, then he must know her. But she remembered all the people around her who could be called friends. Naturally, it would not be this person in front of her. Then there was only one possibility. He was a customer who had visited her. But when she searched her memory, she couldn't remember doing business with this person. Boss Luo felt that his words could at least slightly correct the current topic, but what he didn't expect was that Caroline's gaze at him at this time made Boss Luo a little confused again. The look in Caroline's eyes, including her question just now, clearly meant, "Did you King prostitute me before?" Boss Luo was about to speak at this moment, but Miss Maid suddenly moved. She came to Caroline with a very light pace, still smiling. Facing this woman who could make her feel ashamed of her inferiority, Caroline suddenly felt something that was about to disappear from her. She raised her chin slightly. She was very tall, at least half a head taller than Yu Yi, so she looked down at her at this moment. It may be a little uncomfortable, but please bear with it. After all, this is the fastest and most effective way to explain. I don't think you'll mind later, Yu Yi suddenly whispered. Smile, 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 smile. Miss Maid smiled from beginning to end. But Caroline felt a chill all over her body at this time. She didn't know if it was because of the rain, but she felt that her hands and feet were a little cold, and even a little stiff. Miss Maid raised her hand at this time, then gently tapped her finger on Caroline's forehead. Caroline felt as if she had experienced an electric shock. The moment her whole body was paralyzed, her brain felt like it was about to explode. A large amount of strange information began to pour into her mind. Her body suddenly twitched, and she had to squat on the ground, trembling. Then she raised her head in horror and looked at the woman standing in front of her. That trace of a smile. Caroline's lips even turned white and trembled, as if she wanted to speak. Her heart began to beat wildly, as uncomfortable as a patient with heart disease after strenuous exercise. At this time, she was reading the extra things in her mind about how the shop she walked in was run. Miss Maid took a look and returned to Luocchio's side, whispering, "Master, is this okay?" Luocchio felt that in this context, there should be no possibility of him saying no. He was slightly surprised by Yu Ye's actions. The club had always treated guests with great tolerance. Although this kind of thought implantation technique was sometimes used for convenience, at least there shouldn't be a sequela like Caroline's. However, strictly speaking, this was not a violation. After all, it was also very important for customers to understand the nature of the club. Yu Yi obviously knew where the boundaries were, and she completed such an operation with ease. But looking at the girl squatting on the ground and twitching, Boss Luo even believed that if it weren't for not wanting to dirty the place, perhaps she would have incontinence. "I think Miss Caroline must be hungry. Go and prepare some food," Luocchio instructed Miss Maid. But in Caroline's sober eyes at this time, it was clear that this man was covering up for this maid. It was too much of a bully. But at this moment she dared not say anything. The thoughts that were implanted in her mind about the situation of this shop made her extremely frightened. She even understood why the men who were chasing her outside turned a blind eye to this shop. Seeing Yu Yi turn around and leave, Luocchio looked at Caroline, waved his hand, and moved a stool from a distance to her side. Under her horrified gaze again, he slowly said, "Miss Caroline, I'm sorry for my previous powerless action. So if you plan to make a deal with us next, I can agree to give you a discount. How about a 9-10 discount?" "You might as well not give me a discount. Bastard! Too much of a bully." Chapter 767. Caroline didn't have any dreams because she only wanted one thing, and that was to make a lot of money. Strictly speaking, becoming rich should be one of her dreams. But in this world, there was probably no one who didn't want to be rich. So in this way, wanting to make money didn't seem to be a dream worth bragging about. Her life was so simple that it was very common in this country where the conflict between poverty and wealth was sharp. When she was 3 years old, her father was unfortunately hit by a stray bullet in an armed conflict and died. Later, she heard from her mother that her father was sent to the hospital but failed to be resuscitated. But after Caroline grew up, she seriously doubted that it was because the family couldn't afford it. She had almost no impression of the man who gave her life. Only when she got along with her mother later, and through her mother's occasional memories, did she know a little about this man. He had been running around for money all his life, and in the end, he lost his life because he didn't have money. Caroline felt that in this world, only money could give her a sense of security. Later, when she was 5 years old, her mother remarried to an old man in his 40s. This old man was naturally poor when he was young. Otherwise, he wouldn't have waited until he was in his 40s to save enough money to take a wife. Moreover, he was just a widow with a young child like Caroline's mother. As for young girls, the old man who later became her stepfather could only look at them and sigh. It was still because he didn't have money. Of course, she felt that this old man was really good to her mother. Her stepfather ran a motorcycle repair shop. It wasn't big and the business wasn't good, but it was enough to maintain the family's livelihood. It was just that Caroline hated this kind of life. She couldn't bear the stench of the engine oil. She couldn't bear the feeling when the old man touched her head with his hands stained with engine oil. His hands looked as horrible as if they had been soaked in a stinking ditch for 3 days and 3 nights. She envied those girls who could wear beautiful clothes and sit in cars. Every time Caroline saw a child about her age in a car on the road, leaning against the car window and looking at her through the glass, she would deliberately put her hands behind her back. At the same time, she tried to hide one foot with a hole in her shoe behind the other foot. She didn't want others to see her dark palms and the black edges under her nails that couldn't be washed clean. She was even more unwilling to let others see that she was wearing shoes that exposed her toes. She watched the child go away in a very nice car, though she later learned that such cars were really very low-grade, and looked at the buildings in front of her, which were worlds apart from the shantytown in which she lived, but which were laughably separated by only a street. Yes, it was just a street. Not the end of the street, but only one side of the road and the other. Caroline wanted to be rich. In the end, her mother still gave birth to a child with her stepfather. To the family, this was naturally a huge expense. Because of the addition of a younger brother, the originally narrow room became even narrower. Caroline couldn't stand the sound of her new brother crying in the middle of the night. She could only move to the dirty maintenance room to sleep in the front hall of her house. Caroline hoped that she could become rich and at least have her own room. When she was 14, Caroline met a man. This man came to her stepfather's maintenance department to repair his car. She heard that this guy was a pimp. Having been in this place since she was a child, Caroline naturally knew what kind of profession a cart driver was. This man said that he could give her a chance to make a lot of money. Almost without any hesitation, Caroline agreed to the man. She remembered that the first business she took was on the night of her 14th birthday. Because she was too tired from work, her family went to bed early and obviously forgot that it was her birthday. Caroline didn't feel that selling her first time on her 14th birthday was a sad thing because the man told her that the first time could often sell for a high price. She didn't feel that selling her body was a cheap thing. Just like her stepfather, he also worked to make money. It was just that her stepfather sold his hands and she sold her body. For the first time, Caroline slept with an old man who was almost the same age as her stepfather. The old man was obviously infatuated with her body. Even after enjoying Caroline's first time, he kept in touch with her. Caroline began to meet more customers through the first pimp. She also began to communicate with other sex workers and learn more skills. She knew that if her skills were good enough, she could charge a lot more each time. She began to meet more pimps, and her source of customers gradually increased. At the age of 16, Caroline had started to work alone. Without the agent's referral fee, Caroline felt that she could really make more money. By the way, 16 was also the day she left home. There was no reason. It was just that her family knew about her work and made a big fuss. Oh yes, it was the night of her 16th birthday. 2 years after she sold her body for the first time on her 14th birthday. Originally, she planned to tell her mother that night that she already had the money to buy a decent 2-story building for their family to move in. Mr. Neymar's party? Caroline was putting on makeup in the living room. Because of the hot weather, she only wore a pair of underwear. There was an air conditioner here, but it was a second-hand product that consumed a lot of electricity. The electricity bill was also relatively expensive. The person talking to her was another woman who was in the same profession as her. She was only wearing underwear. Her name was Livia. She was older than Caroline, in her 20s or 30s. At this time, Livia was already wearing heavy makeup and was about to put on her stockings. Before this, Livia had just received a phone call. Now, she was telling Caroline about the phone call. Livia said, "Yes, they said they need 2 more women and asked me if I want to go." "How much do they charge?" Caroline frowned. There were several kinds of parties. Some were purely for warming up the scene. Such parties generally didn't have any direct transactions, and they were just inviting women over to have fun. Of course, like Caroline, she could also discuss business with the party guests in private, but this could only depend on luck. Another kind was to book the place, which was equivalent to a group whore. "Book the place and take the tip yourself," Livia said happily. Caroline thought about it for a while and felt that it was indeed a good job. Mr. Neymar was naturally nothing in the 7 or 8 slums in Rio. However, if it was only here, then he was the emperor of this place. In this era where gangs were everywhere, gangs controlled the slums, and the police were not allowed to enter. Neymar was naturally the master of the place where Caroline was. The guests invited to the party he held were naturally rich guys who were generous. Maybe the tip alone was much higher than the reward for the job. She could not even think of any reason for her to refuse. As for Neymar being a dangerous guy in the eyes of the Rio police, what did this have to do with Caroline? At least the uniformed police could not bring order to this place, but Neymar did. The country could provide protection to the residents of this place, and Neymar also did it. He even paid for the purchase of medicine and even took care of homeless orphans. He also paid for the medical expenses of those who were seriously injured. "Then hurry up," I've replied, Livia said. Caroline, who was biting the eyebrow pencil, made an okay gesture. She stood up and began to put on the black bra she had collected from the balcony. Then she began to spray perfume on her hair and neck. "Get in the car." Soon after, under the urging of Livia, Caroline hurriedly put on her high heels, got in the car driven by the introducer, and rushed to Neymar's home. Neymar's home was on a high slope, but he was still surrounded by simple, low houses. With Neymar's current wealth, it was obviously not a problem for him to move to the next rich area, and he could even buy a villa that even his wife could not help but sigh. But for Neymar, this was obviously the safest place for him. In the white villa there was a large swimming pool. When Caroline and Livia followed the introducer and entered after the bodyguard in front of the door checked, a lot of people had gathered around the pool. Caroline saw some acquaintances here. Of course, the so-called acquaintances were her peers. She counted a little. Including herself, there were a total of 13 women. Perhaps there was something else in the villa that made men crazy at this moment? Caroline picked up a man who was quite capable last night and was busy until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. When she woke up in the morning, it was already afternoon. She didn't have time to eat, so she picked up the current business and rushed all the way. It was already 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and she was already hungry. Livia's situation was similar to hers. The two simply didn't look for their prey immediately. They prepared to eat something first. There was a lot of exquisite food next to the pool. Obviously, in Caroline's opinion, these food alone was enough to pay for this job. That guy, Livia, who was holding a plate of cold food, suddenly stopped eating and was slightly surprised. Caroline looked at her gaze and found that Livia was paying attention to a bald man with a thick beard. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Your guest? If I can do business with him, I guess I don't have to rent your house." Livia rolled her eyes at her friend and landlord without curiosity. "Then who is he?" Livia said, "His name is Joseph. He is the confidant of the boss of the poly slum next door. I heard that he used to fight in the underworld and killed a lot of people. He can even kill a bull with one punch. I saw him at a party the last time I worked in the poly slum next door. The host of the party was very respectful to him at that time. Strange, why did this guy come to Boss Neymar's party? Could it be that the two bosses have some kind of cooperation? Caroline didn't care about the connection between these big shots. She just stared at Livia, which made her feel guilty. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like this? Caroline said with a smile. Livia, when did you pick up the job of the party next door? Why didn't I know? You can't blame me. Livia suddenly screamed exaggeratedly. That day you had your period. You said you didn't have to work and wanted to go shopping alone, so I went there myself. I'm talking about you. I came back that day, but you didn't come back. You were so mysterious. Maybe you secretly took the job and didn't bring me? Your period was also fake, right? You're courting death. Don't you know my time? Caroline snorted a few times, but she didn't continue to ask about Livia. The two women suddenly started to fight. Then, they accidentally fell into the pool and splashed a lot of water. The men next to the pool whistled and walked toward them. The two women who just came out of the water obviously didn't expect that such a move would attract several men. They looked at the men who reached out to pull them. Looking at their fiery eyes, they knew that work was coming. Don't fight with me. The two on the left are mine tonight. Watch me squeeze them dry. Livia smiled. Caroline shrugged. Apparently, she didn't have any opinion about this. The conditions of the men in this party were very good. Caroline was not like before. Now she was more inclined to quality. So she showed a charming smile and put her hand on the palm of a tanned but strong young man in front of her. Well, he's quite handsome. When the water splashed out from the pool, Livia noticed the muscular man, Joseph, furrowed his brows and glanced outside the window. He didn't stop since he came in. Under the leadership of Neymar, he came to the study on the upper floor of the villa. It's just the ladies playing below. Don't worry. Behind Joseph, an old but strong man with a graying beard smiled at this time. He was the gang leader of this place, Neymar. Which one do you like? I'll have someone bring her up for you. Neymar smiled and said in a very hospitable manner, Believe me, my friend, all of these girls today can satisfy you. Let's talk about playing after we finish the business. Joseph gave a simple reply. Then, he turned around and stared at the third person in Neymar's study. There were only 3 people in this study at this moment. It was just a man with an Asian face who looked less than 30 years old. Asians were generally short in stature. This man was not out of this category. In terms of height, he was probably only as tall as Joseph's chest. But Joseph obviously didn't underestimate any of the others' actions at this time because he knew the origin of this man, which was his main purpose in coming to Neymar's territory. Are you Mr. Song? Joseph asked seriously. The man smiled slightly, stood up, and said politely, Hello, I'm Song Howren. Nice to meet you, Mr. Joseph. Chapter 768. Iris Flowers was an underground armed force active in Latin America. In theory, the nature of the Iris Flowers was similar to international mercenaries. However, unlike mercenaries, the Iris Flowers had their own territory under their control. So, strictly speaking, it was possible to describe the Iris Flowers as a warlord. In addition, unlike other mercenaries, who would come wherever there was business, the Iris Flowers basically would not leave the South American plate. From arms, drugs, and even subverting the regime of a small country, the Iris Flowers could give its partners very satisfactory results. Legend had it that the owner behind the Iris Flowers seemed to be an Asian, but what nationality this Asian originally was a mystery. But whether he was an Asian or not, it was no longer important for the forces looking for the Iris Flowers to cooperate because the Iris Flowers army had spent nearly 30 years to prove one thing to all the shady forces and parties in Latin America. There was nothing they couldn't do. Of course, efficiency guaranteed success, and good reputation also meant high costs. If he wanted to hire iris flower or buy something from iris flower, he would have to be prepared to bleed himself. Before coming to Boss Neymar's place, Joseph's boss had already told him not to have any conflicts with the people sent by iris flower. Even if the deal didn't go through in the end, he shouldn't be unhappy. Because just like how a good reputation could convince people, the terrifying revenge of iris flower could also make people tremble in fear. Joseph's boss also spent a lot of money this time to ask Neymar to come forward and contact the iris flowers people. That was why they had this meeting. The actions of the boss of a district naturally attracted countless attention. Joseph's boss could not easily leave his territory. This boss had a lot of enemies. Once he left his territory, he would be attacked at any time. Not to mention the meeting, being able to survive was a problem. Therefore, he sent his most trusted subordinate, Joseph. At this time, after a simple introduction, Joseph sat down next to Song Hauran under Neymar's greeting. Before he had time to speak, Neymar poured a few cups of cachaca, a kind of sugar-cane wine, to liven up the atmosphere. Cachaca, haha, I like its sweetness. Song Hauran leisurely picked up his wine glass. Song, my good friend. Later, I'll get someone to bring you a box of good quality as a souvenir. Neymar burst into laughter. But now, why don't we listen to my other friend, Joseph? Of course, your friend is also my friend. Song Hauran looked at Joseph and raised his glass. Mr. Joseph, I hope we can have a pleasant conversation. I also hope to become a friend of iris flower. Joseph smiled. I'm sorry. Due to some special reasons, my boss can't come in person. Song Hauran said indifferently, we understand very well, so it doesn't matter. The leaders of all forces naturally needed to be in a safe environment. Whether it was because they were afraid of death or because they wanted to maintain the stability of their forces, it was the same. Even the master behind iris flower would not easily show up. Mr. Song, you're so young, but you've become the staff officer of iris flower. It's really amazing. Joseph praised directly. It could be seen that he was not used to such compliments, and his expression was somewhat unnatural. Song Hauran did not mind and said casually, it's nothing special. In fact, I'm just a businessman outside. So, Mr. Joseph, I heard from my friend Neymar that your boss intends to buy a batch of good goods from us. What do you mean by good? It's enough to equip 250 people according to the configuration of the regular army. Joseph said directly. Song Hauran glanced at Neymar with a dark expression. However, Neymar, who was already old and no longer ambitious, frowned and asked subconsciously, equip 250 people? Joseph, this is not something needed for a small fight. Your boss, what does he want to do? Boss Neymar, I came here this time just to talk about this business. Joseph shook his head and said, what my boss wants to do, he has his own plans. Even I can't know too much. As if. Neymar sneered in his heart, but he did not continue to ask. The interests between the slums were complicated. Although the area where he and Joseph lived was not hostile, it was not an alliance either. It could only be said that the relationship between them was not bad, and they were close to each other. They often had dealings with each other. 250 people is not a small number. Song Hauran was playing with a silver ring on his index finger at this time, while looking at Joseph with a faint smile. Mr. Joseph should know that this country has been much stricter recently, right? Especially after the Olympic Games were just held here. Although some places have begun to relax, the resistance is much greater than before. The price is not a problem, Joseph said quite generously, and I also believe in the ability of iris flower. Otherwise, iris flower would not have become a legend in Latin America. Song Hauran was silent for a while and suddenly said, in addition, I don't know if Mr. Joseph needs anything else? When Joseph heard this, his eyes suddenly became hot. He licked his lips and asked directly, Heavy firepower, can you buy it? For example, RPGs? We recently have a batch of good javelin missiles on hand, but the price can't be cheap. Song Howren thought for a while. Javelin missiles? What goods? If it's British goods, we don't want it. Joseph's eyes lit up. Of course, it's an American product. Song Howren smiled. Joseph grinned and said, I said, the price is not a problem. We can even use our products to pay back, if you are willing. Song Howren shook his head and said, We also have samples of your goods. The purity is not good and there is no market. It's better to use cash. In addition, we only want dollars or euros. You should know that. Of course. Then, the price? Joseph asked again. Song Howren said, We will talk about the price later. Now, please allow me to go to the bathroom. I think I may have mixed too much water on the plane. With that, Song Howren stood up, tidied up his clothes, and walked to the bathroom in the room. Joseph frowned until Song Howren had entered the bathroom. He stared at Neymar and whispered, Boss Neymar, it seems that this Mr. Song Howren is not a person who can make decisions. Neymar lowered his voice and said, Believe me, my friend, Song Howren is a person who can make decisions. Maybe he really wants to go to the bathroom. No way. Joseph was silent, but he also knew that Neymar was a cunning old fox. Even if he received enough benefits, he would not help others with all his strength. If it weren't for his boss having no other choice and having to go through Neymar to establish a relationship with Iris Flowers, his boss would never look for Neymar. Joseph drank the cachaca in the cup with some annoyance. Caroline once again realized that a man couldn't simply look at the appearance. She hadn't reached the peak of her excitement yet. This strong man had already thrown away his armor and laid on top of her, gasping for breath. He even self-righteously asked some idiotic questions, such as if he was very strong and had a lot of strength. However, for the sake of the tip given by this man, she didn't mind feigning civility with this man. She even very considerately cleaned up the props he used to commit a crime, his mouth. Many men liked this very much. Naturally, Caroline got a second tip from this man. She kissed the man on the cheek very enthusiastically, then put on her clothes and left. She planned to go back to the pool to see if she could find another target. The reward for booking was fixed. Of course, it was much higher than the general 1 or 2 transactions. However, if she could get more tips in the same time, it would naturally be better. Otherwise, Livia wouldn't have entered the room with the 2 men. Livia's highest record was with 4 men at the same time. Caroline knew that Livia had a strange idea, which was to debut as a porn star. It was just that she seemed to have slept with a lot of so-called producers, but she had never found a way. The room next to the door was Livia's battlefield. The door was unlatched and a crack could be seen. Caroline glanced through the crack in the door. On the bed, Livia was lying on her stomach. Behind her, a man was thrusting hard and even kept slapping her buttocks. Livia, who was very good at responding, naturally responded with a lewd cry. At the same time, she quickly used her mouth to service the other man standing by the bed. Livia seemed to see Caroline peeking through the crack in the door, so she blinked and sent a message. I can finish these 2 soon. Caroline nodded and closed the door gently. She combed her hair with her fingers and suddenly frowned. The end of her hair was sticky, and Caroline showed a chagrined expression. This sticky thing was naturally the masterpiece left behind by the man when he shot it at her face very violently at the last moment. Maybe I should clean it when I go back to the pool. There was no mistress in Mr. Neymar's house. It was said that he had a wife and children, but his wife and children lived elsewhere. This was basically where Mr. Neymar and a few of his men lived. As for parties like this, in the open gong place, guests could use it at will, except that they couldn't go to the upper floor of the villa. Even if they wanted to go up, they had to ask the 2 bodyguards in front of the upper stairs if they were willing. Caroline glanced at the guy smoking in front of the stairs from a distance, and showed a teasing look. After the two bodyguards showed a burning gaze, she walked directly into an empty room. Although there was no one, the bed was very messy. Obviously, a man and a woman had fought here not long ago. However, the bathroom seemed to be empty. Caroline secretly praised herself for being lucky. She didn't know why, but she didn't like to use the bathroom that others had used but hadn't cleaned yet. Opening the bathroom curtains, Caroline wanted to see if there were any peeping guys outside. In fact, she didn't care about being seen naked. What she cared about was whether there was a reward after being seen. She didn't have the habit of showing her naked body to men for free. There was a nice courtyard outside the bathroom. It was very quiet and comfortable. Caroline looked at it and whistled, wondering if she should bring her next target here. Perhaps doing it in the open would make the other party feel more excited. Would the tip be higher? With this thought, Caroline felt as if someone was looking at her. She subconsciously raised her head and looked at the opposite upper floor. Sure enough, she saw someone looking at the bathroom window on this side. That man. Caroline was startled. She recognized the man standing in front of the window with his palm still on the glass. He was Joseph, the trusted subordinate of the boss of the neighboring territory that Livia had mentioned to her before. In fact, Caroline was unwilling to do business with the higher-ups of this kind of gang. Dealing with these guys also meant that she was in danger. She didn't want a group of guys to suddenly break in and kill her while she was in bed with this man. Similar things happened almost every day in this city. The last way to refuse was to close the bathroom curtains. However, to Caroline's horror, Joseph showed a painful expression at this time. He even slapped the glass frantically with his palm. A knife pierced directly into Joseph's neck from the side at this time. Blood splattered directly on the glass window. At the same time, Caroline also saw another face. A man looks like an Asian? Did he see me? Caroline was still trembling at this time, but it was more because she recalled the scene that happened a few hours ago. The tingling sensation caused by the club's beautiful maid instilling thoughts into her had long disappeared. Of course, she also had lingering fears about that feeling. At this time, she naturally didn't dare to tease the club owner in front of her anymore. Instead, she was much more well-behaved. There was also a lot of food in front of her. It looked, smelled, and tasted good. It was what the maid had just brought out. But how could Caroline have any appetite at this time? She just stared nervously at the club owner. She was just a weak sex worker in the slums. She didn't have anyone backing her up. Even if she died on the streets, there would be no one to collect her body. Once she left this mysterious shop, she might be captured by men who were looking for her outside. There was only one outcome waiting for her. She knew very well that only this young man could save her at this time. Boss Luo, who was good at listening, smiled slightly after listening to Caroline's description. So, Miss Caroline saw the murderer's appearance, right? Caroline said in a panic. In fact, I couldn't see clearly at all. It was a little far away, and the glass was a little blurred with blood at that time. That's really unfortunate. Luoqiu smiled and said, encountering such a thing. So, what does Miss Caroline want to buy from us? Do you want us to protect you? Or do you want us to help you solve this matter and let you be safe? Or something else? Can I do anything? Caroline was panicking. Boss Luo said indifferently, of course, all right. You can buy whatever you want. The key is that you have to think about what you want. Then, let the murderer not trouble me first. You know, people like me don't want to get involved in this kind of trouble at all. I won't speak carelessly, Caroline said without thinking. Chapter 769. Why did he become like this? Momo breathed with difficulty. Along with this action, a terrible pain came from his punctured lung. He even had the urge to faint from the pain. Compared to the serious injury on his body, his sweat-soaked clothes were nothing. His scattered bangs fell in front of Momo's eyes, but didn't cover the enemies in front of him. Although they were enemies, a few days ago, some good guys called him Taoist brother with great enthusiasm. But now they were facing each other with life and death. When he went down the mountain, his teacher warned him that the world was not as peaceful as it looked. He didn't turn up his nose at it, but listened to his teacher carefully. However, what he went through in Louis village by the seaside made him see the evil of human nature. He became more careful, and each step was as thin as ice. He was afraid that he would be consigned to eternal damnation and forget his original intention. In his opinion, the immortal path was ethereal. If he didn't have a heart that couldn't be worn down, how could he touch the carefree realm beyond the mortal world? Attaining the Tao with strength? Defeating 10 with strength? As long as I have a high cultivation, I can break through the heavens? How can I become an immortal if I don't defy the heavens? In Momo's opinion, these were just the fantasies of those cultivators who were possessed by Qigong deviation in ancient times. Although the survival of the fittest was in accordance with nature, it was ultimately filled with hostility as it relied on the survival of the fittest. There was no celestial atmosphere to speak of, not to mention that the mortals in the secular world, who only knew the so-called straightforwardness, were just self-deceiving in their short lives. In the end, they forgot who they were. They weren't pitiful, they were just mortals at best. Ordinary meant ordinary. Ordinary meant that there were all kinds of flaws. That was all. However, he had always forgotten that even those who cultivated the Tao and became transcendents were originally mortals. Since it was rooted in the mortal soil, it would be extremely difficult to get rid of its mortal nature. Perhaps only a pure person like Jean Eyre was most suitable for the path of the great Tao. Otherwise, Jean Eyre would not have gotten the lucky chance that disturbed the entire Penglai meeting of Mount Tai. Because in terms of strength, Jean Eyre was not even qualified to show his face among the cultivators and the demon tribe of Kelowna. Momo glanced at Jean Eyre, who was lying on his back. He had been in a coma for several days, since he touched the white jade edict in the mysterious underground palace. In the beginning, Momo didn't know what this white jade edict was. Back then, a strange phenomenon had suddenly appeared in Mount Songli. Almost all the Taoists and demons who had already arrived had gone to inquire about it. Momo was no exception. As for Jean Eyre, Momo was afraid of danger, so he didn't take him with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the face to see Senior Yang Taizi if something happened to Jean Eyre. Senior Yang Taizi asked him to bring Jean Eyre to the Penglai meeting in Mount Tai to broaden his knowledge. Since Momo agreed, he would definitely ensure Jean Eyre's safety. But Jean Eyre had always been a youngster. Later on, he followed them here alone. After Momo found it, he was both angry and amused. But in the end, he could only take him with him. On the third day after the strange phenomenon appeared, all the Taoists and demons gathered here got nothing. Even the successor of the linen gown sect, who claimed to know everything in the world, didn't deduce anything. However, it was precisely because of Jean Eyre's absurd action that such a difficult problem that everyone had no clue about had obtained a breakthrough. A week ago, Momo's search team was carrying out a repetitive search. The journey was boring. Jean Eyre saw a cricket and wanted to catch it to play with. For some unknown reason, he had actually entered a mystic realm that had never appeared before. Later on, after the research of some seniors and the successor of the linen gown sect, they knew that this secret realm had always existed, but it was hidden by a powerful illusion formation. The entrance of this illusion formation kept moving without any trace, and each time it stayed for a short period of time. But such a mysterious moving entrance was found because of Jean Eyre's playful action. Their search team even broke into a mysterious palace. Inside the palace, there were many dangers, and every step was frightening, but only Jean Eyre managed to obtain a white jade edict without knowing it. The white jade edict was miraculous. No matter what method he used, he could not destroy it in the slightest. In the end, it turned into an edict that was directly imprinted on Jean Eyre's back. After that, Jean-Eyre fell into a coma and could not wake up. After the search team came out, Momo found several seniors who had a good relationship with the Celestial Master sect in Dragon Tiger Mountain to check Jean-Eyre's condition. He asked them to guard the entrance and let the other Taoists and demons in to check. After this round of research, they obtained a shocking piece of news. This was a temporary residence built by the great Emperor of Dongyu, and that edict was related to entering the cave residence of the great Emperor who controlled the god of souls. Everyone speculated that they might be able to find the reason why the underworld was closed in the cave residence. They might even be able to get the great Emperor's inheritance. To the Tao world of the Divine Land and the Demon Clan, such an amazing opportunity was like a plate of delicacies in front of a starving man. In the beginning, everyone seemed to be able to endure. But one day later, the place where Jean-Eyre was ambushed 13 times. Someone, or perhaps a demon, wanted to kidnap Jean-Eyre and take this amazing opportunity in their hands. In the beginning, Momo could still defend with the Taoists who were on good terms with him. But 3 days later, Momo angrily found that those who were on the same side as him had turned against him. Fortunately, he discovered it in time, bringing Jean-Eyre to escape in a hurry. However, he himself also suffered extremely serious injuries, fleeing all the way to this dangerous place. On a peak of a mountain in Mount Tai, in front of Momo, 2 summoned golden lightning lions had fallen to the ground. They were dispirited and looked like they would disappear at any time, and he was using the 1,000-year peach wood sword to support his body. Jean-Eyre was still in a deep sleep. He was tied to his back with a cloth strip and brought out from the camp. Fortunately, he wasn't injured, but he was in a desperate situation. Taoist Momo, let's stop here. A Taoist in his 40s wearing a dark gray Taoist robe sighed and said, hand him over, and we'll study the secrets of the edict together. We'll find the great Emperor's cave mansion, and then we'll see what we can get from the cave mansion. Aren't you too greedy if you want to take it all for yourself? Momo snorted. The rumor that he wanted to take the edict for himself had been spread all over Mount Tai. He didn't know who spread the rumor, but it didn't matter now. He wasn't sure if he could get through the current crisis. The successor of the cloth Taoist said that the edict is connected to Jean-Eyre's soul. It was that edict that chose Jean-Eyre, so this was his opportunity. Since it belongs to someone else, it doesn't belong to you. It's useless to snatch it. Ridiculous. Only capable people can get the precious treasure. This ignorant kid doesn't even have intelligence. How can we waste the great Emperor's inheritance like this? I started cultivating when I was 5 years old. Now I've been cultivating for 73 years. Such a divine item should naturally fall into my hands. A Taoist stepped forward. Momo gritted his teeth. Although he didn't like what the Taoist said, this Taoist was the most powerful one among them. He was in the same generation as Momo's unreliable teacher. Before this happened, Momo even respectfully called him martial uncle. I've said that the edict belongs to Jean-Eyre. As for how to deal with this chance, we have to wait for him to wake up. We can't use any means to pressure him. Let him make his own choice. Momo gritted his teeth. So tired. I've lost too much blood. Even a Taoist like him, who strengthened his body with his magic power, couldn't bear it. So tired, why do I have to persist? Momo felt the pain coming from his lungs. He had countless thoughts in his mind. He wanted him to give up or even accept their suggestion. Wouldn't it be better if they all studied the edict together and found the cave to obtain a great fortune? Wouldn't that be better? Now, he was surrounded by enemies. He was facing half of the crazy cultivators of Kelowna and the demon race. He couldn't turn the situation around by himself. Humph! What a nice way to put it. You personally brought this kid up Mount Tai. He has a deep relationship with you. If he had to choose, he would only choose you. Momo, I think it's your Dragon Tiger Mountain Celestial Master Tao who wants to take it for yourself. A youth who was about the same age as Momo, wearing a white tang suit, walked out with a sneer. Seniors, fellow Taoists, he's at the end of his rope now. We don't need to talk to him anymore. Since ancient times, treasures have always been obtained by those who are fated. Although this precious treasure was obtained by that ignorant child, he still brought it before us. Doesn't this mean that this is also an opportunity for us? Ah, that's right. Momo is at the end of his rope. What's there to fear? Go. The inheritance of the great emperor is right in front of us. The crowd was surging, but Momo laughed at this moment. He laughed so hard that his heart was rolling, coughing for a while. He spat out a mouthful of thick blood, but looked coldly at the people who rushed forward or were waiting for an opportunity behind him. He muttered to himself, "The coldest thing is the human heart, the coldest thing is the human heart. Momo, give up and surrender." Along with a loud shout, a gust of strong wind circled around Momo, trying to trap him. Momo spat out another mouthful of blood, splashing it on the peachwood sword in his hand. The wooden sword made of peach would burst out dazzling golden light. Momo said angrily, "Jean-Er's life is connected with the edict. If you want to take it away, it's equal to taking his life. Such behavior is no different from robbers. If I give up Jean-Er, how can I have the face to meet Senior Yang Taizi in the future? You Taoists keep saying that you're a gentleman with a pure heart and few desires. But in the end, you're just deceiving yourself and others. You're all afraid of death. You want to live forever, but you don't want to give up the offerings of the mortals. That's even more pathetic. Then why didn't the great emperor's edict choose you? I'm afraid that even if you get it, you won't get anything. It's just a dream. Look at you now. You're even worse than that evil ghost." Facing Momo's ridicule, those Taoists who didn't listen to any of his words snorted. But when they saw the peachwood sword in Momo's hand, they were afraid. "Be careful, this guy is going to risk his life." Feeling the vibration from the peachwood sword in Momo's hand, some of the weaker ones couldn't help but become serious. But unexpectedly, Momo laughed again, drawing a huge circle with the peachwood sword in front of him. An ice mirror with a diameter of 3 meters suddenly appeared in front of Momo, blocking the crowd. Everyone was surprised, but Momo stabbed the peachwood sword into the ground, shouting, "I, Momo, will be buried here from now on, but I won't give up my promise. This is my Tao. With this sword and mirror here, heaven and earth can be my witness." Then, Momo clenched his teeth, jumping into the bottomless abyss with Jean-Er. "Jean-Er, Jean-Er, I can't see through you. Today I owe you a life. If there's an afterlife, I, Momo, will definitely repay you." They didn't expect Momo to be so unyielding. Seeing him jump down the cliff, they were all shocked, only feeling that their chests were full of turbid air, extremely uncomfortable. "Look at that mirror." It was unknown who said this sentence. At this moment, the mirror was glowing brightly, reflecting the appearances of the various Taoists. Their faces were ferocious like evil ghosts, so unbearable, it was Momo's last words, "Every one of you is worse than an evil ghost. Damn it!" Someone punched the ice mirror, directly breaking it, shouting angrily, "Let's go down the valley and find him. If he's alive, I want to see him, if he's dead, I want to see his corpse." When the Taoists went down the mountain, and wanted to find Momo as soon as possible, a figure quietly came to the top of the mountain. One of them was dressed in white and was untainted by the mortal world. She was a woman with a calm expression. She looked at the peachwood sword indifferently, stretching out her hand to grab it, but her palm was bounced away by the sword. The woman sighed, "What a pure intent! This generation of Mount Longhu had produced a pretty good successor. Unfortunately, this world." She shook her head, saying indifferently, "If heaven wants people to die, it will cause chaos." Glancing at the bottomless abyss, the woman stepped out, slowly falling into it. Caroline didn't intend to use her lifespan as the fund to buy. Of course, she thought her soul should be more important. Although the other party said her soul would be taken away when her lifespan was up, she still thought it was more important. Among the many choices, such as all kinds of emotions and even memories, Caroline didn't want to give up. Finally, Caroline made the most suitable choice, and planned to sign a contract with Luocchio. Purchase service. Solve this problem safely for her. Payment. Her ability to give birth as a female. The sheepskin scroll of the contract had been unfolded in front of Caroline, but Boss Luo suddenly said, "Miss Caroline, do you really intend to use your fertility to pay? What? Isn't it enough?" Caroline frowned, fearing that the other party would raise the price. Luocchio shook his head. No, it's just that in my opinion, a female's ability to give birth is a very great ability. Its price is even higher than your other, such as emotions and memories." "Great." Caroline shook her head, saying indifferently, "Haven't you heard of surrogacy? This idea can even betray the womb. What's so great about it?" Luocchio was silent for a while before saying indifferently, "In view of what you're willing to pay, its value exceeds the service you need. I intend to make some small compensation for the excess." "What compensation?" Caroline suddenly looked forward to it. "If it can be converted into cash, that's the best. Of course, it can also be converted into cash. But I suggest that you change it for something else, Miss Caroline. For example, your liver is not very good because of staying up late for a long time. It's better to make it healthier." "I want money." Chapter 770. But obviously, this so-called compensation did not include extending her life. If she could extend her life, even if it was a year or a month, Caroline would probably choose this. She really felt that life would be more important than money, at least in the same state. If she lost her life, she would not have the opportunity to enjoy wealth no matter how much she had. As for becoming healthier, perhaps it would allow him to live longer. Living in this country, longevity was not determined by health, but by luck. If you were lucky, you would live a long life. If you were unlucky, even if you were a healthy person, you might die when you went out. For example, her biological father, whom she had little impression of, was a good example. Caroline's final choice allowed her to obtain an astonishing amount of wealth from Boss Luo that she had never thought of. Perhaps such wealth was nothing to the truly rich or rulers like Boss Neymar, but it was enough to make the people in the slums go crazy. She curiously asked the boss how he was going to take away her reproductive ability. However, the boss smiled and said that these would not be taken away until the transaction was completed, because the custom here was to take away the payment from the customer's hands in the end. Caroline found it inconceivable. There were too many frauds in this world. Even in the so-called face-to-face transactions, where one party exchanged goods and money, there was always a possibility that one party used fake goods or fake money. But the seller actually waited until the end to collect service fees, which was almost inconceivable. Her first thought was that the other party was not afraid that she would run away. However, when she thought of the beautiful maid's means, Caroline quickly dismissed this idea. This shop probably had all kinds of mysterious means. Otherwise, they would not be so assured. Originally, this method of signing a contract was something that only existed in movies. The sheepskin scroll that appeared out of thin air and the handprint that was pressed down was like leaving one's own mark on the devil's body for generations to come. "Welcome to our next visit." It wasn't until this young boss said this sentence in front of her and politely opened the door for her to leave that Caroline felt like she was dreaming. The rain outside seemed to have lessened a little, but it was still in the category of heavy rain. Listening to the sound of the rain, Caroline subconsciously woke up and hugged her hands tightly. She thought to herself, perhaps this mysterious transaction is just my imagination? Perhaps she had accidentally fallen on the ground when she was running away. Perhaps she had fallen into a pit. Perhaps she had fallen down the stairs and fainted. Was this her dream after she fainted? She tried to turn around. When she left the bright club lobby and returned to the pitch-black street swallowed by the rain, a kind of horror instantly enveloped her whole body. However, the moment she turned around, she only saw an ordinary grocery store. She had even bought a lot of condoms and other daily necessities from this grocery store. Bang! All of a sudden, a loud explosion rang out. This was the sound of guns. For Caroline, who lived here, this was almost a familiar sound. The moment the gunshot rang out, Caroline hugged her head in horror and squatted directly on the ground. The sound was too loud, as if it was right next to her. The sound of gunfire echoed in the street and soon disappeared. The rain once again soaked Caroline's clothes. She squatted on the ground, raised her head in horror, and looked around with a pale face. There seemed to be a lot of changes in the surrounding houses because of this gunshot, but the windows and doors were still closed. People did not choose to turn on the lights at home in this abnormal situation. Knowing that the light could not drive away this darkness, they simply merged with the darkness. This way they could better hide and protect themselves. Caroline stood up abruptly. No matter what, she just wanted to leave this terrifying place at this time and go back to the only home that could give her a little sense of security, the place she bought with her own money. It wasn't until Caroline's figure completely disappeared that there was a soft sound of closing the door. After the door was closed, the sound of the continuous rain became much softer. The maid began to clean up the dishes and cups after the guests left. She suddenly said, "Master, the song Howren that Miss Caroline met is he Luaccio was trying to make a very common cocktail in this country." He propped his hands on the counter, leaned his body slightly, and looked close to the exquisite glass. Through the alcohol in the glass, he looked at Yuye's blurred face and whispered, "In terms of blood relationship, he seems to be my father's cousin." With that said, the boss added some cachaca into the glass. When Caroline returned home in a panic, she didn't dare to open the door immediately. She was worried that Boss Neymar's men might be guarding her home. This technique was too common. It wasn't until Caroline looked for a long time and confirmed that no one was hiding in the house that she opened the door carefully. When Caroline returned to the living room, she slumped in front of the door as if she had drained all her strength. She curled up with her head buried in her legs, trembling. She had been encouraging herself to calm down, but the rain outside had been disturbing her thoughts, making it difficult for her to calm down for a long time. Suddenly, Caroline seemed to remember something, or rather, she felt something. With trembling hands, she finally found a bank card from the collar of her clothes. The boss only promised her a sum of money, but he didn't say how to give it to her. At one point, Caroline thought that this might be a lie that didn't exist. Even on the way back, Caroline had been worried about whether the other party had fulfilled the so-called promise to help her solve this matter perfectly. On the back of the bank card, the password was even written in graceful handwriting. Caroline was startled. She took out her mobile phone in a panic and logged in all the way. Finally, she swallowed her saliva and opened the interface of the remaining money. Really? Really? She jumped up at once. At this moment, it seemed that all the fear had left her. She raised the bank card with both hands and spun it in this simple living room excitedly. The ceiling spun in front of her eyes, and she spun under the ceiling. The world was spinning and passing by. In the end, Caroline jumped directly into the old sofa. She lay on the sofa, still holding the bank card with both hands and putting it under the light as if it had become a new light source. It was countless times brighter than the light. Suddenly, the door of the house opened, which made Caroline raise her voice all of a sudden. "Caroline! You're back! You scared me to death. I couldn't find you all the time." The person who appeared in front of her was obviously her tenant, Livia. Caroline was about to say something. Livia said in horror at this time, "Caroline, do you know that Boss Neymar is dead?" Chapter 771. Seeing Livia's panicked expression, Caroline instantly felt that something was amiss. Boss Neymar is dead? Shouldn't it be Joseph who came from the next district who died? She had clearly seen with her own eyes how Joseph had died tragically. His throat had been pierced by a knife in an instant, and his blood had splashed onto the glass. There was no way he could have survived. She could even clearly remember the scene of Joseph's death. It had been so horrifying. Even at this time, she could imagine how painful Joseph was at that time. But why did Livia say that Boss Neymar died? The ruler of this district died in his own home? Could it be that this was because of the mysterious transaction that he had experienced? In order to get me out of danger, Boss Neymar was also killed? No, no, no. Maybe the murderer who killed Joseph also killed Boss Neymar? Caroline took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. She frantically recalled the scene she saw in the bathroom. Joseph was on the upper floor of the villa, and people were not allowed to go up casually. So, Joseph was probably discussing something with Boss Neymar at that time. Even when Joseph died, Neymar was also at the scene. Boss Neymar ordered people to kill Joseph. Was it for the fight between gangs or something else? No, why did Boss Neymar die too? Boss Neymar is dead? Caroline felt that she still knew too little information and hurriedly asked, "Why did he die?" Livia poured a glass of water at this time and drank it in big mouthfuls. She seemed to have calmed down, but her face was a little pale. Apparently, it was because of excessive panic. She shook her head at this time. How would I know? When the accident happened, I was having sex with a man. If it weren't for the boss men suddenly rushing in, I wouldn't even know. Livia seemed to recall the situation at that time. Later, a group of us were caught in the living room. Do you know? Ronald was crazy at that time. He was Boss Neymar's younger brother. He had always worshipped his elder brother. He was very sad. Tears flowed down his face as he pointed his gun at everyone's head. It was as if he had gone mad. Caroline had also heard about Ronald. He was an orphan, but he was adopted by Neymar when he was very young. He was told that he was Neymar's younger brother. Over the years, Ronald had helped Neymar gain a large territory and was one of the cores of the entire gang. Then, Caroline could naturally imagine the scene at that time. Neymar represented the order of this area. His death also represented the collapse of the order. At this time, it was undoubtedly a disaster for the gang led by Neymar at that time. Later, they interrogated them one by one, but in the end, they couldn't get anything out of them. Livia patted his huge chest and said, "Besides, the people in the villa all know each other. Each of them can prove what they were doing at that time. And not only did Boss Neymar die, I also saw them move out Joseph's body." "Oh, it's the Joseph from the neighboring district that I lost to you." Caroline nodded subconsciously. Livia swallowed his saliva and said, "Heavens, is it worth knowing how Joseph died?" His throat was directly cut in half. His head was attached to his neck and almost fell out. You don't know how much blood he lost. Half of his body was almost covered in blood. It's terrible. Caroline sat down with the help of a chair and poured a glass of water for Livia. I heard them whispering. It seemed that Boss Neymar and Joseph were discussing something. There seemed to be another man present. But at that time, I couldn't find that guy. I heard Ronald say something like Mr. Song is missing. He mentioned something like flowers. I didn't hear it clearly. It sounded like the name of a flower? Livia shook his head. Later, they let us all go, but they also warned us that we couldn't leave here casually. When I came back, I took a look. All the exits were guarded by their people. Everyone who went out had to be interrogated. It seems that something big really happened. Caroline muttered to herself. Livia suddenly asked doubtfully, "By the way, how did you come back? I remember that I didn't see you at that time. Later, I looked for you specifically, but I didn't find anything. Instead, I found this." Livia took out a leather bag from the bag in her hand. This was Caroline's own bag. Caroline had to say casually, "I met a customer who likes excitement. He took me out and raced outside. Then we did it in the car." She glanced at Livia's expression and continued, "I felt a little tired after doing it. It was too tiring to do it in the car. I simply asked that guy to send me back. I didn't expect to lose the bag in the villa. I thought it was missing somewhere. I was distressed for a long time. Livia nodded and didn't doubt anything. She just said casually, "No wonder I heard the guard say that he saw you go out with a man." Is that so?" Caroline's face changed slightly. "The guard said? That's impossible. At that time, she was running away crazily. And she was chased by the villa's guards all the way. How could the guard give her such a proof? He is also Boss Neymar's subordinate. What I told Livia was just a lie made up on the spot. It's that magical shop. That boss. Could it be that he had long predicted that I would tell such a lie, so he used some means to make the guard give me such a false testimony? But how could he know that I would use such an excuse to make the guard say he saw me leave with a man, and not something else? For a moment, Caroline became more and more scared. The more she thought about the strangeness behind this matter, the more she felt that there was a mysterious and strange force that seemed to weave a huge net that covered her life. She rubbed her forehead in horror. Perhaps the nightmare is not over, but just beginning? "What's wrong with you? Caroline? Caroline?" Livia looked at her with concern at this time. Caroline shook her head at this time and said casually, "Isn't it because I feel a little scared when I hear about this?" Livia thought so and was also scared. She said worriedly, "Yeah. When Boss Neymar dies, I don't know what will happen in the gang. Who will take over the position next? I'm afraid no one will submit to anyone. I'm most afraid that they will fight among themselves. Once this happens, I'm afraid this place will not be peaceful for a long time." Although the gangs that controlled the slums had brought order to the local area, when the order collapsed from within, it would naturally affect the entire slum. "AI, stop talking." Livia stood up. "I'm going to take a shower first and then have a good sleep. Let the other things go to hell. Oh yes, this is your salary. When you left, I introduced you. I got it back for you." Livia took out a few banknotes from her wallet and placed them in front of Caroline. She blinked and said, "And this month's rent." Caroline put it away silently. Caroline, who especially liked banknotes, was not happy at all at this time. Livia also felt strange. After all, such a big thing happened. Caroline basically had no mood to sleep that night. She kept holding on to the huge bank card. She felt that she should go to that place again and ask the young and mysterious boss what had happened. This was the first night that she couldn't sleep well while holding her favorite banknote. Momo heard the chirping of insects. He opened his eyes and felt the burning pain from his lungs. But it seemed to be less painful than before. He subconsciously looked at his body and found that there was a paste applied on the most serious wound. It was faintly emitting a cooling sensation. "Who saved me? Where's Jean Eyre?" Momo sat up in fright. But this action instantly affected his injuries, making him almost have the urge to vomit blood. But he discovered that Jean Eyre was right next to him right now. However, what made Momo take in a cold breath was that Jean Eyre's clothes had been removed. A woman in white was observing Jean Eyre's back, observing the imperial edict on Jean Eyre's back. Momo squinted his eyes subconsciously. The woman said calmly, "You've broken 19 meridians. If you don't want to break them again, you'd better not run your chi now." "Did you save us?" Momo couldn't figure out the origin of this woman, although she was very beautiful. However, he could also vaguely feel that this woman was not ordinary from the strange aura she was emitting. The woman glanced at Momo as if saying, "Why do you ask such a shallow question?" Momo gave a start, cupping his fists. "Thank you, I'll never forget your kindness. But if you want this imperial edict..." Momo couldn't help but hesitate. If she wanted it, what could he do? He might not even be able to deal with an ordinary person, let alone this mysterious woman. "My Tao and this imperial edict are completely different. Why should I take it?" The woman shook her head. "I think you're just curious." Momo gave a start again, then forced a smile. Although he didn't immediately believe the woman's words, he was still rather moved. "That's right. We cultivate Tao and immortality. We have our own Tao and sect from the very beginning. Since we've decided on this path, we should carry it out. If we can't even see our own Tao and lose our own heart, how can we cultivate Tao? Those who rob us only have a body of magic power, but without their own Tao, how can they become immortals? The woman suddenly asked, "What's immortal?" Momo gave a start, frowning but couldn't say anything. Finally, he shook his head helplessly, smiling bitterly. "To be honest, I don't know what an immortal is. Is it immortality? Is it the ability to move mountains and seas? Is it the ability to reverse yin and yang and stand above heaven and earth? But that's only the embodiment of power. In my opinion, it's not completely an immortal." Momo sighed, then looked at the woman in white, asking curiously, "Miss, in your opinion, what is an immortal?" The woman in white didn't answer, not even looking at Momo. She stood up, saying indifferently, "There's still some medicine, you can change it yourself tomorrow. Don't use your qi for 3 days. After that, you can use your qi to treat your internal injuries." "You're leaving?" Momo got up with difficulty. This woman didn't seem to be interested in the imperial edict. It was related to the inheritance of the great emperor, and perhaps the secret of immortality. The woman in white didn't answer, turning around and leaving. Momo had an impulse, blurting out, "Miss, what's your Tao?" "My Tao is my Tao, your Tao is your Tao. Even if you know what my Tao is, what can you do?" A light voice came. Momo was moved, seeming to understand something. He asked this woman what she thought of as an immortal, but she didn't answer. It seemed to be the same reason. Momo bowed deeply to her back, saying gratefully, "Thank you for your guidance. May I know your name?" "Chin." The woman in white had disappeared. "Chin." Momo lowered his head, then bowed deeply to the direction where the woman in white disappeared, saying in a low voice, "Thank you for your help and guidance today. I, Momo, will never forget it. If there's a chance in the future, I will repay you." But he didn't know what an immortal was. The next day, Caroline got up early in the morning. She didn't wake up Livia, who was fast asleep, but went out alone. The first thing she did was to go to the bank. There were very few banks here. Even if there were, they had a lot of relations with the local gangs and had to be protected by them. Carlo inserted the bank card into the machine and entered the password. After looking back and forth at the numbers displayed on the interface, he silently left in a daze. She was at a loss as she walked on the stairs. On the way, she saw several subordinates of Boss Neymar. Caroline even recognized one of them. He was one of the men who caught her last night. Facing him head-on, Caroline's legs almost went soft. She wanted to turn around and leave. However, she couldn't believe that the man didn't seem to know her at all. He just looked at her strangely and walked past her with his men. Caroline gritted her teeth and ran quickly. According to her memory at that time, she found the location of the shop when she walked in last night. But to Caroline's disappointment, when she came to this place again, it was still an ordinary grocery store. The old lady of the grocery store recognized her, saying enthusiastically, "Caroline, I just bought some new asterisk. Do you want to buy some?" "No. I don't need it for the time being." Caroline left in a daze again. After Caroline left in a daze, in almost the same place, but in another mysterious space structure, an ancient pine door slowly opened at this time. The club's boss Luo walked out leisurely. As for the servant girl, she held an umbrella behind him and followed him. It was still raining heavily last night, but when the day came, the sun became scorching. The servant girl said, "It's better to bring an umbrella, master." Chapter 772. Wow! Is this Mount Tai? Luo Dance put her hand on her eyebrows and tried to look up. She had just gotten off the train and was still on the platform, but she was already excited. Long Shirua stared at the little butterfly as people hurried to and fro. In the beginning, he had chosen to bring her along not because he wanted her to protect him, but because he wanted her to help him deal with some matters. After all, it was inconvenient for her to do many things in her current appearance. But this guy must be treating this matter as a vacation, right? She tried so hard to tell Luo Dance about this trip on the train, but Luo Dance must have forgotten about it. But what's the matter with her breasts? Every time she saw it, Long Shirua couldn't help but feel amazed. Especially after she wore this dress, it was especially against the rules. Speaking of which, I haven't seen this dress before. When did you buy it? Long Shirua asked curiously. This dress. Luo Dance blinked her eyes and pulled up the dress, slightly lifting the lace inside. She smiled. Sister Zijuan gave it to me. Long Shirua didn't think much about it, but she complained in her heart. That stinky brat ran away without saying anything. But how could this brat find such a suitable dress? Could it be that Luo Dance had encountered this situation before Little Butterfly broke through the barrier? These breasts, Lord Long. A cold voice appeared behind Long Shirua and Luo Dance. Long Shirua didn't feel anything, but Little Butterfly was startled. She looked around in panic and nervously grasped her hand. Don't be nervous, it's Ghost Baby. Long Shirua said in a low voice. Ah, Mr. Ghost Baby? This is a special ability of his clan. You can think of it as an ability similar to invisibility. Long Shirua said simply and walked out of the platform. Luo Dance could only follow her quickly, but she was still trying to find the existence of the Ghost Baby. She looked very nervous. Long Shirua walked slowly, but she lowered her voice. What's the situation on Mount Tai now? Ghost Baby's voice sounded. It's very chaotic. Taking this as an opportunity, the Dao cultivation world and the demon clan suddenly started to fight. The imperial court didn't do anything. Currently, it has no intention of helping or interfering. Long Shirua said indifferently, they can't wait to use this opportunity to consume the strength of both sides. Although the demon clan signed an agreement with the founder, after so many years, there are always some people who have opinions about the original agreement. She suddenly sneered. It seems that the Dao world can't sit still. Do they want to take this opportunity to teach the demon clan a lesson? It seems that after so many years of suppression, it's almost time for things to move in the opposite direction. Ghost Shadow said slowly. The Prime Minister also said that many of the demon clan are dissatisfied with the Dao world. Something will happen sooner or later. This time, the inheritance of the great Emperor of Dong Yu seems to have appeared, which is a good opportunity. Long Shirua frowned. Chi-Chi Kamaya said on the phone that the person who got the edict is missing? Yes. Ghost Baby hurriedly said. That person is the successor of the Huanjin Dao. His master is Yang Taizi. He is a little guy who just entered the Dao not long ago, so he is very weak. In addition, a successor of the celestial master Dao of Longhu Mountain also disappeared with him. The celestial master Dao of Longhu Mountain? Long Shirua was stunned. Zhang Daoling's orthodoxy. If I become an immortal in the future, the world will be peaceful. Suddenly, a sonorous and powerful voice sounded in her heart. Long Shirua smiled slightly and whispered, That little guy is also gone, Lord Long? Ghost Baby's puzzled voice was heard. Long Shirua shook her head. Nothing, I just thought of an old friend. Take me to Chi-Chi Kamaya. He was very anxious on the phone and couldn't explain it in detail until I came. Do you know what happened? I don't know. Ghost Baby's voice was full of worry. During this time, Master Turtle didn't go out and locked himself up. I'm very worried about him. This time, the undercurrent of Mount Tai is turbulent. The Imperial Court came to our Xianyuan Palace several times, but Master Turtle refused to see them on the grounds that he was ill. Long Shirua and Luo Dance walked out of the train station while saying this. To Luo Dance's surprise, she suddenly couldn't hear Ghost Baby's voice. She looked ahead. There was a black car parked in front of them. Ghost Baby appeared at this time, wearing a dark black suit and even a driver's hat. He opened the door and was ready to welcome the two. Mr. Ghost Baby? Luo Dance cried out in surprise. Although the face was the same, the appearance was too different. Although she didn't have much contact with Ghost Baby, the gatekeeper of the Elysium Bar left a deep impression on Luo Dance. In his impression, the Ghost Baby wore clothes with many nails. Even his nostrils were pierced with earrings, and he had a head of colorful hair. However, at that moment the Ghost Baby looked very refined. His skin was very pale, and he looked like a noble young master. Ghost Baby said indifferently, "After all, we are going to attend the meeting of Mount Tai, so we pay attention to the dress. Is there a problem?" "No, no." Luo Dance shook her head quickly. It was still the same awe-inspiring look. Luo Dance walked to the back of the car softly and then pulled Long Shirua. "Mr. Ghost Baby, where are we going now?" Luo Dance asked curiously. Ghost Baby turned around and said, "Near the Double Dragon Pool. Xianyuan Palace has its own property there. Well, please sit tight, I'm going to drive." Wow! This was simply a race. Sitting cross-legged in the simple room, Momo began to heal himself. Thanks to the medicine that the woman surnamed Qin had applied on him, his external wounds had healed. His meridians had also recovered a lot after a few days of recuperation. He had recovered about 30% of his strength, so he could be considered to have the ability to protect himself. After saying goodbye to the mysterious Qin woman, he left with Jean-Eyre on his back. When he finally found a village, he found that he was at least 60 kilometers away from the place where he fell off the cliff. No wonder he didn't meet those from the Tao world or the Monster Clan along the way. It seemed that the woman had transferred him and Jean-Eyre out. Momo soon found a local family with the surname Wang. It was a very simple village name. He found an excuse and withdrew some money as payment. This was considered a temporary stay in this family's home. Jean-Eyre still didn't show any sign of waking up. At this time, the owner of this family suddenly knocked on the door and brought in some food. The man's name was Wang Das-hun, an honest farmer. He only had one son, who was studying in a high school outside the village. He would only come back during the holidays. "Brother, my wife made some millet porridge. It's inconvenient for your friend to eat since he can't wake up. Feed him some millet porridge." Wang Das-hun pushed the door and walked in with a chuckle. "Thank you, Big Brother Wang." Momo received it gratefully. In this kind of situation where everyone was surrounded by enemies, Momo was touched by the kindness of an ordinary person. However, the Tao world and the Demon Clan would find him sooner or later. At that time, he was afraid that he would implicate this family. "Big Brother Wang, I plan to leave tonight," Momo said to Wang Das-hun while feeding Jean-Eyre the millet porridge. "So soon? You can stay for a few more days. It's okay." Wang Das-hun said quickly, "Aren't you injured too? I saw you covered in blood that day." "I'm almost healed," Momo said casually. "Besides, it's not a good idea for my friend to wake up. I plan to send him to the hospital in the provincial capital." "That's true." Wang Das-hun nodded and said, "How about this? It's not convenient to go out. There's a small bus coming in every few days. I'll help you contact it and see if there's any other way." "Thank you, Big Brother Wang." Momo nodded. "By the way, Big Brother Wang, can you pick up your phone? I've been missing for some time and haven't told my family that I'm safe." "Take it." Of course, it wasn't a high-end phone. It was probably a counterfeit that cost a few hundred yuan. However, it was enough to make a call. Wang Das-hun left the room tactfully. Momo thought for a while and dialed a number. He had destroyed his phone when he was escaping. Otherwise, he would be exposed to the surveillance of others. There were many rules and regulations in Kelowna's Tao world. For example, every person in the Tao world had to register with a special organization of the government. They also had to install a special positioning system on their phones and receive calls from that organization every now and then. At this time, Momo naturally didn't intend to follow this rule and report to that organization. He just felt that he had to inform his master about such a big thing. In addition, he had to explain it to Yang Taizi. But when he started to dial his master's number, he stopped abruptly. What if they were monitoring his master's or Senior Yang Taizi's mobile phones? Perhaps they could find his current location just by the signal source? Even if his master and Senior Yang Taizi came forward, they might not be able to resist those guys who had already been possessed by the devil for the chance and pounced on their prey like ferocious dogs. What's more, if the two elders were involved? Momo forced a smile, but he didn't use Wang Dashuan's phone. He looked at Jean-Eyre on the bed and couldn't help but smile bitterly. You're sleeping so soundly. He shook his head and sighed. He took the millet porridge cooked by Wang Dashuan's wife and scooped some with a spoon. Then he brought it to his mouth and gently blew it several times. Then he brought it to Jean-Eyre's mouth and started to feed him carefully. Eat it. I don't know if I'll have another chance to eat it. It's better to die full than to die hungry. It was like heaven and hell on the other side of the street. What was interesting about this city was that no matter rich or poor, they could all live in the middle of the mountain. If it was in other developed cities, ordinary rich and noble people wouldn't be able to live there. But obviously, it wasn't so in Rio. The simple bungalows next to the luxurious villas of the rich. Dozens of years ago, a large number of retired soldiers didn't get any preferential treatment from the country after they returned. Instead, they faced the horrible problem of unemployment. They had no source of income, even no land of their own. However, the country also had a strange policy at that time. For example, if you built a house in this place, then this land belonged to you. A large number of retired soldiers, as well as people who wandered from other places, began to choose this golden area to build their own homes. 2-story, 3-story, and even 1-story houses sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain, quickly occupying this golden land with an invincible sea view. But of course, there weren't many entertainment facilities in the slums built in this way. At best, there were small parks or simple football fields built by the gangs that controlled the slums. Luoqiu found that Miss Maid's umbrella couldn't be used soon, because a large piece of dark cloud drifted over from the sea. Yu Yi had the habit of arranging flowers in the club lobby. Before coming to this city, Miss Maid had her own flower shop where Luoqiu used to live. But here, she was afraid that she needed to find another one, even though she wouldn't stay in Rio for too long. This flower shop seems to be good. Of course, it wasn't in the slums, but on the other side of a street, the territory of the rich. The florist shop was a white house, with many South American flowers placed outside. Luoqiu rarely saw the kinds of flowers that were commonly seen in daily life. You choose, I'll just look around. Luoqiu smiled. He rarely studied flowers if it wasn't necessary. Seeing Yu Yi go to the owner of the flower shop and ask, Luoqiu began to look at the species here. He curiously walked to a plate of plants with Brazilian iris written on it. Looking at the white jade-like leaves and butterfly-like blue petals, he wanted to buy it. This kind of Brazilian iris has another name, jade butterfly. Boss Luo turned around. It was a man in a dark blue casual suit. He looked to be less than 30 years old. As the man said, he walked to the pot of plants, smiled, looked at Luoqiu, and suddenly asked, Are you from China? The man also had an Asian face, and asked in the native language of China. Boss Luo nodded with a smile and said casually, Yes, I'm here for a few days of travel. Hello, my name is Luoqiu. Travel? That's not a good choice. The man also smiled, but also reached out his hand. Hello, my name is Song Hauran. Nice to meet you, my compatriot.